Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Truth That Heals podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Anthony Hernandez, and today I have special guests coming all the way from South Sioux, Nebraska.
No, I'm actually in Florida now.
Okay, take two. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Truth That Heals podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Anthony Hernandez, and I have a special guest coming all the way from Florida. Is my good friend, Katie. Katie, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Ryan. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to do my first podcast ever with you here on the Truth That Heals podcast. So I'm ready. Let's do it.
I'm excited, and we're locked in, and this is a very important episode for me because when I started doing this podcast, man, I didn't expect it to ever grow. I just did it to just get some things off of my chest. And also because a lot of people didn't want to hear my truth. So often I would get shut down, shut up, or being told like you're a liar. So I made this podcast so that I can get my truth out. And I didn't expect it, but here I am today, a couple years later, and now I'm talking to someone who was also in the same group community that I was in. Even though we were in totally different circles, it's like we were in totally different universes, but it's like a parallel universe. So I never expected that this would happen. And I'm grateful that this podcast has grown. So anyways, I just needed
it's
to
really
get that
funny
off.
how it's funny how things kind of go full circle. I remember when you first started releasing some of your podcast episodes, I was listening to them, but you were starting them almost like a blog where you could read them. And that's what I was starting reading. And you actually kind of inspired me to kind of share my own story. So writing has been something that I've always used as a means of creativity, a means of expression. And as you and I both know, one thing that we were told to do often was journal, right? And we'll kind of get into that. But, people ask me, Katie, when you started writing your blog and sharing your story, it's like I was there with you the whole time. How did how were you able to express yourself that way? Well, a lot of it was I did a lot of writing throughout my own healing journey, right? And in sharing my story. So those writings over time, were little reminders of going back and forth, right? And being in the same kind of position you are is I did it just as part of my own healing. I didn't expect people to reach out to me and say, wow, your story, I never knew that about you. I wondered what happened to you after high school, so on and so forth. But more importantly than that, I had people, Ryan, that were actually with us in that same group, not necessarily right alongside my side. Some of them were, but some of them were in, other branches of this order. But the funny thing is, it's like a circle that connected us all back together. And the funny thing is, your foundation, and I don't find this ironic, of your podcast is the truth that heals, right? And so I think by each of us sharing our truth, sharing our experiences, sharing our journey, whether someone is ready to share theirs on the level you and I are sharing mine, it's healing, So I've had a lot of people reach out to me personally and say, man, I read your blog and gosh, it reminded me of things that I forgot about, things I didn't really want to remember. So my whole purpose in doing what I've done this last year, and that's what I want to share with you, is that I actually wrote, I believe it's 22 blog articles of my journey from start to finish. And like I said, I did it just for my own healing journey, to get it out, right? To share my story and put that out into the world and the universe. And, whatever God's purpose was for that, I just wanted him to bless that. And if there was one person that it helped, I'm content with that. So again, thank you for allowing me on here. I'm so glad that it's allowed us to connect. And what people don't realize is how much our thoughts really shape our reality, and those thoughts also influence our actions, our decisions. Ultimately, I'm a firm believer they shape your destiny if you're not careful. So, let's dive in this, Ryan. I'm happy to share my story here, with hopes of, someone else hearing this and having the courage to share theirs. So
for you when you joined, like what was your thought, what was going through your minds, and what was your recruitment process like?
Yeah, so let's go back to that here in a minute about the thoughts and kind of what got shaped. But for me, Ryan, to be honest, I never imagined myself ever joining a religious community. Okay. My background is I was born in small town Iowa, with a very close-knit family. Um, and I was introduced to sports at a very young age. So my parents sacrificed a lot for me, in my younger years to be able to follow that dream. So my dream was to play Division I softball. Not only to play Division I softball, I had dreams and aspirations to make the USA Olympics team, and I poured every ounce of my being, into that. Now I played other sports as well, but softball was my primary focus. So what happened for me, in kind of the recruitment process and how I got introduced to the order was, when I was in eighth grade, my parents made the decision, in my best interest to send me to a Catholic school, in Sioux City, Iowa, which was about 40 minutes from where we lived, and I grew up on a farm. And so, for me, I spent most of my time with my aunt living there during the week, and then I would see my parents at all of my sporting events. They never missed them for anything. But the reason why they made that decision is the school I was going to prior was just a small 1A, school with, I think I might have had 60 kids in my entire class if I was lucky. So this was putting me into a 4A school opportunity, with a coach that was just taking over the program that they thought was going to be in my best interest. So prior to this, I traveled all over the world, on AAU teams, travel ball teams. Like my whole life was softball. Now, what happened for me, in that process of going to a Catholic school, inevitably you start learning a little bit more about your faith, right? Because you're going to a Catholic school. Now, I was given the opportunity as an eighth grader to play varsity softball, which, if any of you don't kind of understand how that works, is when you graduate as an eighth grader, that summer of my eighth grade year, I was eligible to play varsity for Heelan High School. So, when you're young and at that age, I was just turning, like, I don't even think I was 14, maybe 15 yet. I was 14. You get introduced to, high schoolers that are 16, 17, some of them are 18. So obviously there's that pressure to try to fit in. But for me, being an eighth grader, I had the pressure of kind of, who is this person coming in and thinking they're going to start, playing when I've been here for 4 years. So obviously that was kind of a challenge in itself. But long story short, my first year went really, really well. I loved everything about it. Got to meet a lot of new people, right? By going to a new school. But the good news was I was surrounded by some of those gals that I played travel ball with. And they kind of were an influence in getting my parents to, make that sacrifice to send me to this Catholic school. So my grandfather, he was a devout Catholic. He was probably one of the most devout Catholics I've ever met. He was the man that had his clipboard in the morning, that prayed his prayers faithfully on the toilet before he was getting ready in the morning. And, always had his St. Christopher medal. And I kind of share this in my blog. Like, he kind of instilled in me something that, planted a seed that just hadn't bloomed yet, right? Like, and I believe that, firm in biblical foundation, you reap what you sow. And so I remember going, with my grandfather to church and lighting candles and praying for our family and friends. And I even remember going to the Carmelite nuns when, someone was really sick, it seemed like, or we really needed a strong intention. We would go there and ask them to pray for that. But long story short, in the process of me kind of doing my journey at Heelan and going to Catholic school, I was very particular in trying to stay out of trouble as far as like, I didn't really like, I mean, did I partake in, parties and things like that? Yes, but I was really scared to sacrifice what I worked so hard for. So I kind of was stuck in that middle of peer pressure. But long story short, in that process, I met, a gal who I'm not going to mention her name for her, privacy's sake, but she was the one that introduced me into the order. Okay, so what happened was there was a party and a lot of my friends got busted. I wasn't drinking, but I did hide in the dryer for about 45 minutes and the cops did not find me. So I successfully hid. However, word of mouth gets around and I had some community service hours that I was given. So what I chose to do in that community service hour is I met this gal by going to school early for some math, right? And she invited me to come to some youth group that was taking place in South Sioux City, Nebraska, which is literally right across the bridge. And so I remember distinctly, Ryan, going to this youth group and I was so mesmerized because I remember seeing all these young nuns, right? And they were wearing these gray habits. And, to be honest, I went to Catholic school and we had nuns in our school, but they're wearing like orthopedic shoes. They're like 70 some years old. Like, that's not the vision of like nuns, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I remember they had this like opening prayer and all of this stuff, and they were playing guitar and they were singing, and I'm like, whoa, these guys can kind of do it all. But where they got me was one of the nuns challenged me to a game of pig playing basketball. And I was like, game on, right? So of course, like being an athlete, I wanted to show off for these nuns because I just couldn't figure out like what this is. But I mean, I will tell you, there was definitely like a light I saw in them, a happiness, a joy. I'm like, I didn't know what it was, but I was definitely like intrigued by it. And so I remember after like doing the first youth group session, I went back to this gal that I was kind of talking to early in the mornings, like going to math together. And little by little, she started inviting me to do more things with the faith, right? So um, the biggest thing was I told her is like, if you tell anyone, I'll kill you because like I can't have my friends knowing that I'm like going to hang out with a bunch of nuns. And there were some priests and brothers there too, on Wednesday nights. So that kind of just transitioned into my curiosity of like wanting to learn a little bit more. And they made it like really fun, right? Like they made it in simple terms that you could understand it. Well, eventually, as I kind of got more plugged in, I was more naturally intrigued to learn more, not only about the Catholic faith, but just like my personal relationship with Christ, right? And so with Catholic school, we had to, and I say had to because we didn't have a choice. We had to go to mass once a week, right? And I remember this gal who I was going to math class early and we were kind of, helping each other on math that we were working on because we both were in advanced classes. She would go to mass every single day. And I was like, what is wrong with you? Like, you get up early to go to the cathedral every single day. So then again, she's like, hey, she kind of encouraged me to go to church. And not only did she go to church, she had like this big, thick prayer book that I'm like, all right, I don't know what's going on. Basically, what happened, and I'll just kind of get to the nitty gritty of this, of how I got recruited, was after kind of going back and forth and being involved with them and getting to know, the order better and the sisters, there's a lot of genuinely, genuinely good people in that order.
Yes.
When I tell you about the religious sisters. And I believe wholeheartedly that they were all in the same position that we got ourselves in. So what took place was, I don't know if you remember, World Youth Day was in Germany. I believe that was 2005. Okay.
Yeah.
And so what happened was during one of these like youth events, I met, and I'm not going to say his full name, but I met a priest by the name of Father J. Okay. He was this very young, energetic priest that I remember the first time meeting him, I'm like, everybody thought I just watched the reactions around him and I'm like, God, these guys like worship the ground this guy walks on. Like, who is he? And then all of a sudden these youth start telling me that, oh, Father Jay, he's the one that, comes and meets with us and, we do these manifestations. And like all of this was like, over my head the time. But I knew that there was like this vibrancy about him where people were definitely like, Father J, Father J, Father J. And he was a short Filipino man, but he had some powerful presence that this youth was attracted to, right? And so back to Germany 2005, I was invited by this same gal to go to a World Youth Day with this organization. And I was like, absolutely not. I cannot go. It was state softball that year. We had worked so hard to make it to the state tournament. Well, what happened was we were unexpectedly knocked out the first round. And
Mm.
I was completely devastated. Like, to me, my life was over. We had to work so hard for this. Like, how does this happen? Right. Well, ironically, because we got knocked out, we were back in time before World Youth Day took place. Now, I already had my passport and things like that because I traveled before, but I was approached by this gal, and her parents were very respected in the community. Her dad was actually a surgeon, very educated, well man. Her mom was one of the sweetest ladies that I ever met. Like, great people, right? Great people. And they offered me to go to World Youth Day, and that her dad had, basically paid my way for me to go to World Youth Day. And for me, I never liked receiving anything for nothing. I never wanted it to be done. But I think looking back, I hope that I was a good friend to their daughter. I think she was misunderstood oftentimes because of her devotion to the Catholic faith. And it's kind of hard in the world today. I think maybe she was bullied or just not accepted the way that she should have been accepted for who she was, because she's an amazing person. But anyways, I decided to accept this gift to go to World Youth Day. And during this time in World Youth Day, we went from Germany to Poland to Prague. It was a mind-blowing experience. As far as, I'll never forget getting to this opening ceremony, and there was people from all over the world, just basically there for the faith, right? And anyways, the Pope was getting ready to talk, and it was just kind of this gathering. But at that time, and who knows, maybe your and I's path crossed and we just didn't know it, but there was youth from California, youth from New Jersey. It was like these kind of cliques of youth groups from all over the different sides, that were all part of this organization, right? So I got to meet a lot of people my age that made this journey as well. So what I forgot to mention, and this is a key part, is when I first met Father John, he gave me a
Father
relic
J.
card. Oh,
Father J.
Father J, my bad, Father J.
I'll edit it.
Okay, yes, when I first met Father J, he gave me a relic card. Okay, at that time, I didn't know what a relic card was, but it was a card of Saint Faustina. Honestly, didn't even know who Saint Faustina was, but when I had like my first encounter with him, he asked me, "Hey, I'm going to give you this card. All I ask is you pray to her, every single day. Ask for her intercession." I was like, "Well, I don't know what it is, but I can make that commitment to say this prayer on the card, right?" Well, when I was on this journey, several times I was approached by Father Jay and some other of the other religious, that he would like to hear my confession. Okay, so even though I was plugged into the Catholic faith and the Catholic school, there was something about why I need to share, my sins with someone else, or my struggles with someone else, was a little weird to me. And so I resisted it. I'm like, if I need to ask forgiveness, I'll just ask the Lord himself. Like, why do I have to tell it to a third party, so to speak? So I didn't fully like embrace what the Catholic faith was teaching, because it was still part of my journey, right? And so I think respectfully, like 3 times during that pilgrimage, I had asked I'd been asked, and I declined. Well, I'll never forget this. We were pulling up it was towards the end of our pilgrimage, and we were in Poland, and we pulled up to this building, and I remember distinctly like this green type roof, right, on this beautiful facility, but I didn't know what it was. Well, as we were walking to go to our rooms, I remember seeing this like big ribbon on this door, where everybody had candles lit and they were like reflecting on like what looked to be like a convent, right? Like a room. And what I didn't realize until I walked into this basilica or the shrine that we were having mass as, it was the shrine of the card that Father Jay had given me. Okay. And so I realized that I was at the, shrine of the Divine Mercy. It was during that time that I was there, they were sharing about Divine Mercy Sunday, and it kind of like all clicked to me. And I remember we had adoration where they exposed the Blessed Sacrament. We were all praying and, kind of just having quiet time. I got a tap on the shoulder from Father Jay. And I remember he said, what more than a powerful time for you to experience the Divine Mercy right here in Divine Mercy Shrine. So I kind of broke down because my emotions were definitely like kind of in awe of like, I'm at the place where, I've been praying for the saint for intercession. So I decided to go to confession. And when I was in confession with him, there was something about him that was just like soft voice, something that made you feel, safe to share or whatever. But, it's not like I committed a lot of grave sins. So it was just, basic things that I was sharing. But what caught me was he had said something to me about, he mentioned the V word, vocation, right? And I really had never been, that had never been shared with me or talked about. And we kind of talked a little further into that and, talking about my calling and my vocation and what God's calling me to do. And I laughed at him. I said, Father, there's no way that I would ever be meant to be a nun. Like, it's just not in who I am, And he shared something with me that happened to me, not anything terrible, but something that I never shared with anyone before. Never. And I was literally blown away. Okay. I was like, how did he know this? And then he proceeded to share with me that he has a very strong devotion to the Blessed Mother, and he asked for her intercession to help guide youth, right? And he said, Katie, when you go back home, you're going to find out a truth about yourself. And when you find out this truth, you're going to see clearer than ever that you are meant to leave everything behind, to follow Jesus in this life. And I was like, I didn't know what to say, to be honest with you. My whole world kind of got turned upside down. And I just kind of, my thought was like, this is crazy, So anyways, the pilgrimage we came back from, and we were kind of proceeding as life as it's been, right? When you get back from something from that. But as I kind of had, I don't know, learn more about my faith, I did have like that desire to learn a little bit more, to get clarity, right? Because I saw all these young people that just knew a lot about it. They were confident. I saw them praying, and there was something attractive there for me. But what happened was I made the decision when I came back that I wanted to get confirmed. Okay. Now, part of this whole process was I needed a copy of my baptism certificate. Okay. And my confirmation name that I chose, take a guess.
Catherine? Oh,
Saint Faustina.
Faustina.
Faustina. Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
hold
So,
on.
anyways,
Can we start again where you say take a
yeah,
guess?
yeah. So when I got back, I chose to get confirmed. And in order to get confirmed, I needed to have a copy of my baptism certificate. So I'll let you take a guess at what my confirmation name I chose.
Let me guess. Was it Faustina?
Faustino, bingo. So that was my confirmation name that I chose. But when I went to go get my baptism certificate, I knew I was baptized in a church called St. Michael's in South Sioux City. So I went there to get my baptism certificate. And when I got it, I read on my baptism certificate when they gave it to me, it said Katie Ann Graves. Okay. Now, Graves was my mom's maiden name. My last name was Brianna. So I was very confused why my baptism certificate did not have my dad's name, right? So what I did I ran back to my grandparents' house, which I spent a lot of time at. I went straight to their attic and I started tearing through, okay, all of the baby pictures, all of the young pictures that they had, because back then it was a lot of like Polaroid shots and boxes. And I just got this like weird pit in my stomach as I was digging through all these pictures. I never saw a picture of myself when I was a baby with my dad that raised me, right? So I start to question things, but I don't know really where to begin, right? Because it's like that's a very strong like assumption or confusion of what's going on. Now I did find pictures of when my dad was in my life, but I was like probably around 5 or 6 then, or no, probably like 4. Like, I was young. I was very young. And so what I did was I tried not to panic, but there was part of me that's like kind of what Father Jay had like kind of said, so I'm like, what is happening here? So I went to a cousin that I was pretty close with that I spent a lot of time with. It was my aunt's daughter that was older than me, so technically she was an adult that I could stay with at times. And I had a very strong temper when I was younger, and I think that kind of helped with like my competitiveness in athletics. But sometimes it got me in trouble because when I was demanding, I was pretty demanding. So long story short, I said to my cousin, listen, what is going on here? And I said, you need to share with me. And she got like deer in the headlights. So I knew something was wrong. And she's like, no, I can't. It's not my place. So I like literally picked her up off the ground, boom, slammed her against the wall. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not letting you down until you tell me like what the heck is going on. So she had revealed to me at that time, very reluctantly, she did not want to reveal to me at that time that actually my biological dad was not my dad that I had known my whole life. So as someone that was barely 15 years old, I didn't probably handle that with the proper response, right? Like, I took that as like almost like a rebellion that happened within me. I remember instead of like even trying to address my parents over it, it was more like I kind of kept it within, right? And so now looking back at the situation, obviously our parents did the best they could with what they had, and they always did things to protect us and put us in the best place in time. But at that time, I was very vulnerable, right? I was very young. I was just learning, about my faith. I'm in a new environment, and so. If you could take a guess, who do you think is the one person I turned to when I found this information, right?
FRJ, Father J.
Yes, Father Jay. So I remember emailing him because he had been in contact with me via emailing him, and I was just kind of sharing him, so on and so forth. Now, it's a little bit of a blur because of my, emotion back then, but I think what happened is I tried to have a conversation with my mom, and she just wasn't really open to sharing about it, or just gave me like little bits of the partial truth, which like now looking back, I understand why. But what I did is I went a very extreme kind of route. I was like, I need to figure this out. Is this what God's really showing me? He turned my life upside down. And the problem was I didn't have that open relationship with my parents, not because they didn't have it, just because I chose not to open that door, and I chose to open the door back to the alliance, so forth. And so what happened to me is obviously I kind of had that push pull, and this is where the manipulation kind of had come in. And so basically what I did is they're like, listen, this is what God's calling you to do. This is why your life has been turned upside down. I shared this with you. I knew this truth was going to happen. And so part of my rebellion, part of it was I was so hurt, Ryan, that I wanted them to feel my hurt, because I there is no greater man than the dad that raised me. Like, he is my dad. He is who I call dad. But there was a part of me that was so broken when I found out that biologically, like, I wasn't a part of him. But then there's that other part of like, well, then who am I, right? Like, this identity thing, like, who is that other part of me? And I think the other hurtful thing is that so many people did know, but it was never shared. And so I made a, very like 180 turn, and hurt a lot of people in my decision to do this, but I walked away from softball entirely. I gave up the D1 scholarships that I dreamt of. I gave up the relationships that I had built with coaches, with family. I back then as a rebellious kid, in that method, I wanted them to feel the pain. And how could I make them feel the pain? I wanted to take from them what I felt they took away from me. And so basically what I did is I decided to give everything up. And I decided to join the order when I was, basically 17 years old. I wasn't even old enough yet to make that decision. But my parents are like, what am I going to do? I'd already made up my mind at that point. They were already trying to separate me from my family, meaning like they had me stay certain nights of the week with the order itself to kind of get prepared for entering what they called postulancy, which is in Dover, Delaware. And what pains me is the manipulation that took place, and it wasn't just me. If you hear a lot of other people's stories that joined this movement, they had some type of traumatic event or some type of pain in their life. That's normal. We're all going to have pain. We're all going to have, events, but they found ways to use that as, God's calling you to this type of life, right? And so at 17 years old, I left everything behind. Like I said, walked away from the Division I scholarships, which I had multiple of them, did not play my senior year of softball. And I went to Dover, Delaware, where I joined about 15 other youth at that time from all over the world that was starting the postulancy journey. So postulancy, they kind of described to us as, that beginner, that introductory stage where you get introduced to the lifestyle little by little, and, they'll help you discern if this is meant for you and so on and so forth. So, the hardest part about that was once we got to postulancy, they allowed us to have a little communication with our family. But when I say little, like very, very little, like about this much. And they wanted it just so that, your parents could stay in touch with you. But when I say little, I maybe got to talk to them twice during my postulancy. Our postulancy was supposed to be 1 year. However, they made an exception with they called it a batch, right? With our batch, that we were all progressing so well that they were going to move us on to our novitiate. After I think 8 months, we were there. And so what happened during postulancy is we were in one group, right? And then before you go to your novitiate, there was three separate female groups that they would kind of split you off into. One was more hands-on the youth side. That was like the order that I was introduced to. They would sing guitar, they would sing and play guitars, and they were more hands-on with the youth. The second group that you could be assigned to, they were on the media side of things. So they would do more of the behind the scenes. They would follow, as you mentioned, Father B around, and they would record his seminars, right? They would kind of be the backbone behind his message and what he was trying to put out there. And so it was a little bit different. And then the third group was a contemplative lifestyle where you had no interaction with the outside world. And so when we kind of got split up, I got split originally. I got split up into the first group that I met, which was more hands-on with the youth. Okay.
I wanted to go back and kind of digest what you've been through from being in sports to having a future and then going to World Youth Day. Let's kind of digest that a little bit. Did you finish high school? Were you a senior? Were you getting
Yeah,
ready?
I did. Yep, I begged my parents to let me graduate early, and they said absolutely not. They refused. That was one of the things they were not willing to commit with. So I did graduate with my class. I did walk down for graduation, which was back in just just turned the year of 2006. So it was the beginning of 2006. I did have a graduation party. I did kind of get to say, that was kind of like my goodbye to everyone. They knew I was going. A lot of them didn't understand it, but they still were supportive because that's just the type of family that I grew up in. So I remember like when I packed my bags to leave, like there wasn't a lot you had to pack. Okay, because in your postulancy, you were pretty much given a white blouse and a gray long skirt, and that's what you wore every single day. So, when it came to like material side of things, we were not allowed to bring our cell phones. Which back then I think I had like I don't even know, like a razor flip phone, it wasn't anything like we have today. But really, anything that connected you with the outside world, you weren't allowed to bring. So even if I wanted to bring like books or, reading materials, they weren't allowed. So everything was basically kind of stand through, and what they thought was acceptable you got to keep, what was not acceptable you didn't. Now, I later learned in this process, because I did bring several books I was interested in reading that I wasn't allowed to bring with me. And part of the reason for that is I was told that we're only allowed to read approved material. And that approved material, ironically, was material that was wrote by the founder of this alliance. So he had wrote several books, and we were able to read those. But anything from the outside, they really just disconnected you with. So I would say from the lifestyle I lived in to postulancy, that was already a pretty big shock for me, because it was like going down to this like extreme life of simplicity. But then they really coordinated your life in a schedule. So for me, postulancy was just the very initial step that they kind of test the waters and get you like introduced. When we go from postulancy to novitiate, like, yeah, that was one of the biggest shocks, and we can kind of talk about that. But to give you like an idea of what my average day was in postulancy is, we would wake up pretty early in the morning. They had us waking up like around before 5 a.m., I know, in postulancy, and we would have what was like morning prayers. Okay. And with these morning prayers, you were given a breviary that you kind of like is a prayer book, right? That each day had a, I don't know, like each day you followed it, right, through the
Yeah.
calendar year. And then we would usually have morning prayers, and often one of the priests would either come to our postulancy house, or we would get to go to, for special occasions, to like where the brothers were missioned. And we would have like mass collectively together, but obviously separated. And so I know they did that because part of the female order got to see the male order, and like that we're both like moving towards that direction of following our vocation, right? So they tried to create that like this is important to pray for each other. They wanted you to kind of, they didn't really want you to get to know each other, though. You didn't get a chance to get to know each other. Even us in postulancy, like they controlled very much what conversations were kind of taking place, and it was really like structured. But I remember that's when we were introduced to fasting. And for us, our fasting was either like plain oatmeal or bread and water. And so little by little, they introduced us to fasting. So we started just fasting. I think it was 3 days a week they started us on, and then it gradually like kind of increased over time. But I have a really funny story about this that I'd like to share.
Go
So
ahead.
I
Yeah, I'd
kind
love
of,
to hear it.
yes. So we each were assigned different chores. So some weeks you were the cook, some weeks you were cleaning. Like we had chores that we had to follow. And I remember, Ryan, like just feeling so hungry because we just would eat bread and water or like plain, oh, bland oatmeal, right? Like I'm like, if I eat one more bland oatmeal, I'm gonna throw up. So I thought I would be creative, and I was going to scoop out the Mother Superior's bowl of oatmeal for that morning. And then I was gonna add 2 cups of sugar into our oatmeal for the other sisters, so we could like at least have oatmeal with sugar in it, right?
Yeah.
So I scoop out the Mother Superior's bowl. I grab secretly the sugar that's in this container and I dump 2 cups into this oatmeal, right? I'm stirring it like as fast as I can so it can dissolve into the oatmeal. Well, we're all sitting at the table, and I'm like, these sisters are gonna love me. I'm gonna be their new best friend. Well, all of a sudden, they pray, and the mother superior begins eating her oatmeal. And I watched the sister across from me like take a bite of her oatmeal and like almost gag. And I'm like, what the heck? So I'm looking across the table and they're all going like the same reaction. And I haven't taken a bite of my oatmeal. Well, the joke was on me because that wasn't 2 cups of sugar I put in the oatmeal, it was 2 cups of salt. So they knew what like I was trying to do. So like they're all trying to be troopers of like choking down this like god awful salty oatmeal while the mother superior is enjoying hers perfectly fine because I thought I was pulling a quick one, right? So it's just like little things like that subconsciously you kind of build relationships and friendships of just like we all were searching for the same thing, but we all were being slowly like kind of introduced to a completely different lifestyle. Then what started happening after, the fasting was incorporated, the sleep became less and less. So instead of us originally like waking up at 5 in the morning, we were getting up at 3 in the morning. Oftentimes, like we were being waked up in the middle of the night to do like adoration, 1 hour of adoration, and they would partner us with someone else in there. And so you just kind of became like accustomed, to learning this new lifestyle. And they're explaining how important it is for you to fast and for you to do this so you can get clarity, right, on your vocation. And that's kind of what they were implementing to us, right, and having us understand. And I know that it was a struggle for some people, and it was definitely a struggle for me. Like I missed my family, I missed my friends, I missed that lifestyle, but that's what they would say, like, this is what you're supposed to offer for your family.
Let's just go back to you're doing adoration. You're going to early hours. You're trying to be sneaky and adding sugar salt to your food. What was your nocturnal schedule?
Yeah, so for us, usually we were in bed lights off by like 9 p.m. And so then what would happen is, you would get about 4 hours of sleep if you were lucky. It was usually about three because you're also worried about not waking up for your nocturnal adoration. So I remember.
What slot did you have?
So I had a tough one. I had that like midnight to 1 a.m. to where like you just kind of fell asleep and now you gotta wake up, but then you kind of gotta fall back asleep before you have to wake back up at 3. So one thing I struggled with, and I am not ashamed to admit this, is like sleepiness in these prayers because it's like hey, I was used to sleeping to 8+ hours a night, and now, you're getting to this point of like, okay, now I have to wake up in the middle of the night, and then I have to be cognizant in this hour of nocturnal adoration that I have, and then I have to try to fall back asleep and wake back up, 2 hours or less later to do morning prayers at 3 a.m., right? And so I remember like it's something that I used to like one time I remember I got like the mother superior pulled me aside and I journaled about steak. She's like, you were writing like steak in my journal. So I think I was just half asleep. I was hungry. Like this was just something like, we live in America. So when things are convenient and we're hungry, we go grab something from the pantry, right? Like we go through a fast food. Like, so this was it might not seem big at first, but these little changes were like definitely something that we all had to adjust to. But they had us, with that mentality of all of these little sacrifices we are doing for our family, we're doing for our vocation. So they tried to focus us like on the why and the purpose, right? We were chosen to be victims, like to offer victimhood, right, for our families, meaning that if you go back and you look at every family, like every family has brokenness, right? Like every family has some type of trauma that's happened. But what they would teach us is about something called generational curses or hexes. And so
Hmm.
things that when you would start to struggle with something, like for example, like sleepiness, I struggled with it. I'll be honest with you. Like I struggled with it. And they would say, this is, placed you on your family. So we got to get through this. And then, when you were feeling that, they would encourage you to start to seek other types of like voluntary penances to offer in conjunction to kind of what you were doing. So like I remember, as I was kind of questioning, like, why am I so sleepy? Why is this happening? Why is this? Why is that? It was like, well, let's incorporate one more day of fasting. Let's incorporate, they weren't big penances. They were just little things that they were getting you to accept to try to offer in addition to what you were offering, right? And so they basically taught that we were called to be what they call victim souls. Like we were called to be that soul to offer our life in the form of this vocation, to save the thousands of souls that we were going to be connected with in our lifetime. And, they use people that, had pain and had hurt or had struggles, and they connected it with people that we love deeply, like our family, our friends, right? For me, it was I love sports. I love my grandparents. They used all of that as a means to kind of keep you between the lines of what their end goal was. And, they were very smart. They were very cunning, in how they kind of built that foundation of like, knowing, like almost like a manipulation tactic of every struggle they knew they were about to introduce you to. They had engraved that why to keep you not questioning it, right? And so like I just remember, and we all have it, right? Like if you look back at your family, like we have family members that, you could consider black sheep, or family members that fell off the wagon. Like in my family, addiction is a very, very strong thing. So, I've lost cousins, I've lost uncles to alcoholism, and, just things that they would want you to share. So the interesting part was you weren't allowed to share things with the other like youth or sisters in your batch, right? You were really only able to share in what they would schedule you for a manifestation. And that manifestation was kind of set up to either be with your direct mother superior, which we all had like in our postulancy, right? So if there was 14 of us, we had one superior that kind of stayed with us and oversaw everything. And the second thing was that, when you shared that with you, that was a time for you to like open your soul, right? Now the other thing they wanted you to do is, and I mentioned this earlier, is they wanted us to journal everything. They wanted it to be in writing. And then every night at the end of our nocturnal adoration, we were to leave this journal with the Mother Superior for her to read. Okay. But looking back at it now, yeah, it's another form of a manipulation tactic where they're reading your journal, which your journal was you opening your soul to the Lord, right?
What
Like you,
it's also spiritual abuse.
it's very much spiritual abuse, because what they were doing is they were taking, like someone myself who was very young, new, and vulnerable to the faith, who just had this pretty traumatic life experience as far as identity goes, of turning my life upside down. And then, getting this handout of using, your faith, your calling, right? Using a true gift of vocation that some people are called to, but they purposely found, vulnerability in youth, and in that vulnerability they did create division between that source, which was you and your family, or they would link it back to your family to get you to, sacrifice what you're going through, thinking you were doing it out of love for those around you, right? And they just, it was different for everybody because everybody's life circumstance was different, right? Like I remember, one of the sisters that I was with, her mom was diagnosed with cancer. She was dying. And they had convinced this youth in a moment that she was losing her mom to leave her mom to follow a vocation, which ultimately led to her never getting to say goodbye. Her mom, I believe, was also affiliated at one point in time with this order. On the outside, they called them third orders. And so she never got that closure with her mom, but they used her mom as the method of this is what your mom was praying for. This is what your mom is offering her cancer for, is your vocation, is your calling, you know? And looking back now at, 36 years old of what took place and me having a 10-year-old son now, like it really breaks my heart of how many other people um, that we're going to talk about, and I want to talk about. I want to talk about the nitty gritty, right? I want to talk about what this led to, because there are a lot of people that are still out there that haven't been able to find the key to break that bondage, and they're still struggling in life. They're still dealing with pain that really never should have been imposed upon, especially when you're talking in the name of the Lord, in the name of faith, in the name of obedience, whatever you want to put it in name. And I don't care what religion is, whether it's Catholicism, whether it's the Lutheran, it doesn't matter. The point is that reflecting on this, it's like we have an obligation now, and our obligation, whether some people are going to look at it and think it's crazy, or some people are still attached for whatever purpose, we have an obligation to speak that truth, and that truth is what's going to set those people that are stuck free, and maybe like I said, it's just this conversation that we're having and kind of getting into it so people can realize, man, you're right, it wasn't my fault. Because I think what happens is, remember when I told you about our thoughts, right? I think
Yeah.
a lot of people, and the biggest thing that they focused on, that I will say probably kept me there as long as it did keep me there, is that if you missed your calling, right? Or you left your vocation, you were forever going to be a misfit. Okay. And so I think that's like the scary thing, because all of us were there to discover our identity, right? Like
Mhm.
who we are, what we were called to do. And I think we all went there with the right intention of seeking the truth, and that's what I want to end, like not end this with, but to have that message, is that our thoughts are going to, I don't know, by consciously choosing to reshape those thinking patterns, we can help people break free.
Yeah, and I'm happy you're here talking about that because it's so easy for, I mean, like people who are still in the cult to think that we're just hateful, hex people. But there is a story that we have, and we have the rights. And I think we're not coming out of a place of hatred. We're not coming out of a place of malice. This is just our truth. But
What they were trying to get you to focus on is they wanted you to see value in suffering. Okay, they were testing people to see how far they were willing, right? And postulancy was a test, how far you were willing to suffer for those that you loved, those that had a purpose, those that had a why, right? And I feel like the ones that they successfully were able to, you know, uh, kind of push to the limits were like myself. Like one thing I am not is, like, I've never been known just to give up, right? Like I'm not a quitter. Like I'm a fighter. Like I'll fight for, what I believe in. But at the same time, what saved me in the end is that I was not willing just to surrender my mind, meaning that, I've always been very adamant, even at a young age, of wanting to know the truth about everything. Like, and I asked a lot of questions from a young age because I just wanted to know. That was like part of me.
so you
But
so
my
you
point is,
weren't a sheep.
no, not at all. And I actually, probably, like, if you talk to my batchmates, I went through the worst suffering, and a lot of it was self-inflicted because I wasn't willing to just give up, right? So, like, what I mean by that is, if you tell me, okay, that there are three apples on this table, but I see, feel, touch, smell, taste two oranges, I'm not believing there's three apples on that table. right? So what they tried to do in our like postulancy specifically is they introduced us to something what they called holy obedience, okay? And what they said is that when you are getting introduced, right, your whole purpose or what you need to do is obey, okay? And your obedience is passed down through authority of like a superior, right? So what was taught to us, because I remember questioning, I'm like, I'm Katie, you're disobedient. Well, yeah, I'm not. Why would I obey that? That's, why would I obey to do something like that? That's hurtful to myself. That's hurtful to others, right? But they little by little, it's like just like the little chisel, right? They chiseled at you to believe that when you didn't obey your superior, regardless of what that obedience was given to you, if it was something that was outside of God's will, that what's the word I'm looking for? Like the responsibility wouldn't be to you, it would be to the superior that ordered you to do. So all you were meant to do was to obey, right? And I'll be honest, a lot of the youth that I was with, they were a lot softer than I was, meaning like they were a lot more easily swayed of like just they didn't want to get in trouble, so they just did it, right? They just did it. Where I was more apt to like question authority, always respectfully, but like you just weren't gonna break my will, okay? But what kind of started happening, I realize now, is in our postulancy, we would go back and forth from the house we lived in to there was another house where like the main religious were at, and there was two separate orders. But this particular one, this order, and I'll mention the name of the order because it was the secular institute of the alliance, and so the superior, the general superior, who went by, we'll just say Mother A, she was very, very hardcore, very strict, very like to the point. A lot of people were extremely intimidated by her. They actually kind of paired me with her. And now looking back, I think they did it because they thought she would be one person that could kind of find a way to kind of break me, so to speak, to kind of get me to bend the way that they were, wanting us to bend, because they really wanted to make sure how far they could test you before they sent you to novitiate.
Yeah.
And I feel like the ones that got sent to novitiate were the ones that had some deep-seated things when it came to either their family or like their identity, like something they had to fight for. But in my group, all of us that were there, all of us went to the Philippines. So
Well, when you look back and you think about all the manipulation, um, like what would you tell yourself if you could talk to postulant Katie? Like what advice would you give her?
yeah, I think the advice I'd give myself is that the truth that I knew about myself, meaning that I came from a good family, right? I came from a family that did the best they could with what they had, right? I came from grandparents that were at every sporting event, that they loved me, and that regardless of, what has happened, there's nothing that can't be talked about, that can't be worked through, that can't be, discussed, but that none of them would ever, ever want me to feel the guilt or burden of having to go through the unimaginable things that ultimately we went through in the name of their salvation, in the name of our own salvation. And I think most importantly, on my personal journey with my relationship with Christ, is that Christ already died on the cross for us. He already shed his blood. He already gave that ultimate sacrifice. There's nothing that we can do to take that away, And so for me, reflecting back on just the pain and suffering that I endured, and I endured it in a spiritual abuse, meaning that if I knelt with Christ today, and he was in front of me, he would have never, never wanted any of us to go through what we went through, and I don't even, he would never ask of us to go through that. And I think that's like what is, the most thing that like hurts my heart is that, you know, all of us that went through what we went through, we did it out of love. We did it out of love. And, I think that they thought that they could have us do it out of fear. And yeah, maybe fear was part of the manipulation tactic. But deep down, every single person that crossed path in there, that I was with, they had a heart of gold. They were seeking to know, to love, to serve. Like they had the right intention in there, and they were taken advantage of. And I hope, Ryan, and I pray that the people that led this, that the people that did this, I hope it's just a sickness that's within their head, that you would never intentionally do what you did knowing the damage that's done. You know what I'm saying? Like, I hope the mother superior that um, kind of I got really connected to, from like a motherly standpoint in that sense, someone that I trusted. Looking back, I would hope that she was just as sick, mentally in her head, that it wasn't done intentionally. Because for me to look back and try to accept that they intentionally, you know what I mean, like intentionally and deliberately would put so many people through that, it's just like it's the unfathomable. And so I often wonder if I ever cross paths with these people again, um, what would I say, or what would I do? And some people ask me that question, and I haven't really got that far in my healing process to like do that. It's not like a desire necessarily that I have, because I believe my healing is just what I've done within myself, right? Like, and a big part of that was having to literally every day consciously choose to reshape these thinking patterns that were brainwashed. They were brainwashed into us at a very young, vulnerable age. And, by consciously choosing to reshape these, it's allowed me to break free from so many limiting beliefs that I had about myself, that I had about my family, that I had about my friends, that I had about the possibility of a life, right?
Even
Calling.
even with I mean our faith, it even had that boxed in.
Yes, 100%. You're exactly like that, and I kind of feel like, I don't know. I was that square peg that was trying to be pushed down into that like round hole. Like, there was nothing that was comfortable ever. But I also, a scripture that is like engulfed to the core of who I am. Okay, Ryan, is Romans 8:28, right? That we know that all things work for the good of those that are called and who love him for a greater purpose. And so, like, for me, um, I never gave up. Like, I never gave up my search for truth, and I never gave up um the reality that God would lead me to where I was meant to be. And he did. They used kind of that incident where I discovered the truth about myself. They really used that relationship with my mom to try to convince me that my mom was this like monster, and how could she hurt you? How could she lie to you? And like, looking back now, I realize my mom was a saint. She
Mhm.
went through a lot of tough things in her life at a very young age, and she was doing the absolute best she could to protect me. And that's what she did, is she protected me. So just to know like how they manipulated my relationship with my mom, yet to try to use that manipulation for me to like trust this mother superior, like, I love you, I care for you, I care for your soul. I mean, it's really heartbreaking.
Mm.
Because that's what happened. And I'm not gonna sit here and say that they weren't able to like put those negative thoughts into my head and have me like, think those thoughts. And the reason they were doing that is ultimately they wanted you to be separated from your family. They didn't want you to have that outside influence. And they made it seem like it was a spiritual warfare aspect
Yeah.
of it. But the reality is, you and I both know it was part of their control, it was part of their manipulation, it was part of the plan to get you so detached from everything around you that if we take away your food, we take away your sleep, we put thoughts into your head, right? You're tired, you're hungry. Like anyone from the outside looking in doesn't need to realize that this isn't cult-like behavior. This isn't, a manipulation tactic. And, the thing is, I feel like what they did with us in the inside is the same thing they were testing the waters on the outside, because there was a lot of third order members that were very much bought into this same philosophy, this same mentality. And when I tell you, like, very smart, educated, wealthy people were bought into this, they were bought into this. So if you can have someone who has a PhD, who is a surgeon, who's a doctor, who's a lawyer, all these people that you consider smart individuals got bought into this on the outside, not let alone the inside, you can see where, these guys had more power than what people were realizing, but
Yeah,
yeah.
they did have a lot of power, and um, also they had a lot of influence.
You can't imagine ever thinking someone would intentionally want to do what they've done. And it's not just to me, it's not just to you. There are thousands of other people that have been affected by that. I already know the truth and the peace within that I have, and I'm not going to dictate or allow the time and control that they had over me for 5 years of my life. And realistically, it's not 5 years of my life. It was 5 years that I was in that order, but the healing journey has been an ongoing journey since I left, and like I was mentioning, like I was there in 2006, and I think I got out right before 2012. And I just was finally able to write my blog and share my story in 2024. So when you start looking at that time frame of when I finally felt
It's
comfortable to like share my story, part of that was because I had been praying for the longest time that when I get to that point of wanting to share my story, I don't want it to be from a place of anger. I don't want it to be from a place of hatred. I don't want my story to have one other soul lose faith, because that's not what it's about. I wanted to share my story when I got to that point where I felt that my story would be one of encouragement, right? One of empowerment, one of like, listen, I don't want you to read my story for you to feel sorry for what I went through, or, not imagine like the pain and the suffering and the abuse that I went through. I want you to read that story that, we all have a redemption story. It doesn't matter what we've been through. It doesn't matter how many mistakes we've made. It doesn't matter how broken you are. It doesn't matter any of that. Like,
just seeing that I can find purpose in life. It's it's beautiful. It's just it's a great experience to have someone like you, not someone like you, to have you here sharing, and like we're cross sharing. It's really I'll say it's even healing for me. So thank you, Katie. Katie.
like in finding my purpose, and in finding my passion, like, and I know I'm not there. It's still part of the process, and I'm still working towards that. But all of the healing that I've been doing reverse from what, they cause. But outside of that, even just the traumatic events that we've all had in our lives, they're not even traumatic. They might just be small encounters where, like I said, life circumstances have happened and they've caused us to have like some type of belief or negative thought about ourselves. Like, I'm now more than ever, I'm grateful that I came out of this journey from where I came out of, because the work that I've done in rewiring, right? Like my thoughts and these circumstances from not just those 5 years, but even before there, it's bringing generational healing, Ryan. Like it's bringing everything they implemented to make you afraid of. It's just shattered. It's broken. Like I've had more healing these past 2 years with sharing my story and really diving into this on a deeper level with my family, my parents, my son, like all of those around, it's like you just see this revolving door start to open in their lives. And it's like, that's our mission, that's our goal. So whether it's what we went through or what we didn't go through, like it's finding your purpose and passion and opening those doors for others. So I am a firm believer that in coming out on the other side of this, even as terrible as it was, some of those things that we went through, it has like leapfrog me, so to speak. It's like given me this push of like seeing all of the work that I put into healing and seeing it open doors. And it's like strings, like people are attached to you on strings. And I believe that. So, Ryan, the healing work you started, you opened a door whether you realize it or not for myself. And I hope the healing I've started has opened up to, and it doesn't matter what your faith is, it doesn't matter what your background. This is a universal principle that can be applied no matter what walk of life you're in.
Now let's go to you complete your postulancy. Your group, I mean, your group is just so good. You don't have to do it in a year. You have to do it in 8 months. So
8 months. Yeah, it was about 8 months. Yeah.
I
hmm
mean, so I'm guessing that they're singing they're just singing praises to this batch, pumping you all up for going to the
Yeah, and I want
Philippines.
to share one encounter that happened before we went. And
Sure.
this, my mom shared this with me, and I didn't even realize this. Okay. My parents decided to make the trip to Dover from small town Iowa. They really wanted just to see me, to kind of check in with me, and so on and so forth. What I didn't realize, and this is the type of control, and my mom shared this with me, and this was pretty profound and powerful, is she didn't realize how much control they actually had until they tried to make the trip. So they drove over 20 some hours, okay,
Yeah.
to come visit me in Dover. Um, when they got to Dover, they messaged them, whoever's number they had, they must have got from the religious back in South Sioux, because that's where the main
Mm.
home was. They weren't allowed to see me. So they were in Dover for 2 days before they got to actually see me. And then when they wanted to see me, they wanted another sister to go along. They wouldn't allow you to go by yourself. So, like my parents got to bring us pizza, and I think they took us to pick up ice cream, was what it was for. But my mom shared with me after the fact, she's like, that was the most heartbroken ride home, is they drove over, 40 hours consistent consecutively, right? To be able to see their daughter. And they got to see me for less than 2 hours, because they kind of controlled that. And my mom said deep down after that encounter, when she saw me, she knew, like, you weren't allowed to have that open conversation because you had that like sister, right?
Yeah.
Like not your batchmate, like a professed sister right alongside, kind of monitoring that situation. But one thing she started noticing is her kind of concern. She said when she first saw me, she distinctly remembered, she said, how tired I like, she knew me, like her heartstrings were connected to me. She's like, you look tired, but she's like, you were still vibrant. You were still your friend, you're still your friendly self. And I think that was like the biggest thing that I kind of want to talk about, is like they had this ability to keep you quiet about what was going on within and putting this joy out exteriorly, I think the biggest thing that I remember is like all the times we went through this pain. Like I had people say, well, I remember seeing you guys at this mission. I remember seeing you guys at this mission. You were so joyful. You were so full of light. And it's like they had that way of like keeping what was happening behind those closed doors as like that sacrifice you were making, right? So that when you went out to public, you were that light of Christ for all those around, right?
Mhm.
Because our mission was to save all of these souls. So, you know, as I went through healing and I learned, I'm like, that is one tactic of brainwashing, right? Of cult-like behavior, of what when people go out. It's like if you follow some of these stories outside of religious cults, but just things where like people are being abused or they're being sex trafficked and they're doing these things, why they act a certain way. when they are in front of people, right? Like, and
Yeah.
so, I mean, my mom said that obviously I didn't know. She's like, you were still yourself, but she knew that she had kind of lost me at that point because here she drove, all this way with hoping to get to see and spend time with me. And at that point in time, um, it had been almost like 7 months since I had talked to my family. So that's why they drove out just to try to see, hey, like, what's going on. They made a trip out of it and stopped a couple other
Yeah.
places, but
But
yeah.
did they like announce it like 2 weeks in advance, or was it like, hey, we're
No, they
here?
never let me know. Yeah. So what I didn't know is they had already been in town for 48 hours. And it was just like a last minute thing of, hey, your parents are here. We're gonna allow you to go get pizza. Like they allowed them to buy pizza for all of the my batchmates and the sisters that were there. And they did allow me to go to Cold Stone ice cream. Like I remember that.
Yeah.
And um my good friend who I'm just gonna say Sister O. She was my batchmate. She was with me through thick and thin. She got to go with me. And I remember her and I like we were thinking like we could eat this whole container of ice cream ourselves right now if we really like could. But they brought it back for the whole thing. So um, from the outside world, I guess what I'm trying to say is that my parents sensed something wasn't right. And I believe that's the motherly connection that
Mm.
my mom had to me. Like, I believe that's a gift that we all have with our kids, motherly, fatherly, you have that connection. So, um, as much as what I guess my point I'm trying to get here, Ryan, is as much pain as we went through, our loved ones also went through pain while we were gone. The pain of missing us, the pain of not knowing, you know, what we're doing, how we're doing. Like I said, because that communication was just it
It's
was
cut.
cut, and they really didn't want any communication. And if there was communication, like in the event that you did get to write a letter, everything was screened before it went out.
Yeah.
They made it seem like, oh no, it's just got to go through its process. But you and I both know, like it was their control of what was coming in, what was going out, because they were trying to avoid crises. That's the word you're going to hear a lot is avoid crisis. Avoid, and crisis is you wanting to leave your vocation or, so on and so forth. So
A-
that
a-
to me was just, yeah.
And when your family came, like, did they warn you? Like, don't say this, don't say that, keep a distance.
No, I think they didn't really warn me, and I think they did it intentionally. I think they really just limited my time, knowing that, hey, if we let her spend time with her family, right? And they didn't really allow, I mean, my family was allowed to like go to the postulancy house, but it was just in that main like um, communal like center, because obviously it totally has to be illegal and not per code how many people they would fit
Yeah.
in these houses, as far as like what the county allows and max occupancy. But everything was pretty done quiet and under the radar always with them. So really, I just remember my parents coming and we like had pizza just in this communal area, and it was literally like 2 hours max from that time to whatever, and it was just like I saw them and they were gone, but at that time, like it wasn't running through my head because I didn't know they had been in town for 3 days. So pretty much they'd been in town for 3 days, only get to spend 2 hours with me.
Did you
So
did you ever have time to go visit them ever?
so I never went back to visit my family at all during postulancy. So when I left, I got to see them once when they drove out. And then in those 5 years that I was gone, no, nope, I never saw them. I do recall one time, actually, I did get to go back. So that is incorrect. One time they let me go back to I can't think of what they called them. What was the adores? I think they called them adores is what they had. They had an adore in Omaha, Nebraska, that I got to go to, and I remember my mom and my brother going to that. And so And when I was back there, that's also when they set up a time to bless my grandparents' house, I believe is what they did. They set something up there. But yeah, so in my total of 5 years, I only got to see them twice in 5 years. And then as far as like any type of communication via like telephone or things like that, it was absolutely non-existent, especially during the novitiate period in the Philippines, which really kind of led to, even after novitiacy in the order that I was in, it was really like a 5 year period where it was the whole time I was there was pretty much cut off.
So, so I want to get to the Philippines chapter, but sticking with the family because I also have my questions, and I would also maybe get some clarification just for my journey. Well, they did have the Adore. There was a family Adore. I'm not sure if you were even with the Alliance at that time. There was a family Adore in Alabama in 2005. Did you ever go, or
Yeah,
did you
so
ever?
that would have been before my time of actually joining. That must have been shortly after or before whenever World Youth Day was, because I know
Okay.
it was 2005 that I went to World Youth Day in Germany with that pilgrimage to Poland and Prague and all that. That was a 30-day pilgrimage I was on with
Dang.
the Alliance, 30 days. Mhm.
So during that trip, because you bring up Adore also, so during the family Adore, it's in Alabama, and my parents come, but I was given strict obedience to shun them. I mean, did you or do you know any other people in the group who were ever told to ignore or shun their family?
Um, for me specifically, like I said, I only had one encounter where I was able to like my parents drove out. However, I know that there were others in the like batch that I was in that I feel they thought were more crisis prone, that they were strictly not allowed, I mean, any communication because they didn't want any type of, I
Mm.
don't know, like any type of communication. I think they either feared like if they gave them a little bit, that wouldn't happen. I think for me, with them like physically coming and having that sister with me by my side the whole time, they knew that they could kind of control and regulate, and I wasn't gonna say anything, but at the same time, like it was hard for me because I remember when I saw my parents after I'd been 7 months, there was that part of you that was like, oh my God, my mom, my dad, like so good to see them. But there was that other part of you that they were already training to let go of that worldly connection, right? And like to know that, gosh, I know I miss them so much and like it was good to see them, but like this is why I'm here, right? Like this is what I'm working through. This is what we're offering. It was all about that. And then I do remember after they left, for me specifically, I had to have a manifestation with the superior. So they use the manifestations a lot as like something that was very good. It's something that like if you got one, like you should know that's a good thing. That means like the superior is really like invested into you and invested into your vocation, right? So for me, now I know that it wasn't about that. It was anytime they thought they needed to get information or they wanted to get clarity on thoughts or something you were going through, they set that up. And so I remember after that manifestation specifically, it's interesting that this kind of brought back up is they were asking me questions about that, what do you think about seeing your parents? And I remember kind of getting a little emotional about it because um it was one of those things where it's like I left so kind of abruptly that
Yeah.
I didn't really get that closure, so to speak, but yet like even with like what they were trying to manipulate in my relationship with my mom, there was that sense of like peace and like security in her presence. And so I remember like opening that up a little bit, and I remember how it got fun and
Mm.
turned like immediately, like immediately. And usually when you were thinking or saying something that they didn't want you to go down that path, they would often, ask of you, like for me, after my parents left, I had to be 48 hours in silence and 48 hours away from the community. Like I couldn't engage in those things. And that was like what they were saying was supposed to be part of my like spiritual journey, right?
Yeah.
In like reflecting on this and offering this. But really what I realized, it was a damage control. They didn't want you talking to, let's say Sister O about how much I, miss my mom or, whatever, because then that would, inevitably allow them to start thinking about their family. But to answer your question, like, yes. And I actually, we'll get into that, but I'll talk about an encounter that I had where others were allowed to invite their parents and I was not. And that happened in the Philippines. And we can kind of discuss that later on. But yes, I did see that where like they 100% either didn't want you to talk to them, associate with them, or involve them. Yeah.
Okay, because that was like a second thing that I've had questioning all these years, and you really uh, partially answered that was that, um, well, years later. So first you have that incident in Alabama, and then my family, I'm ignoring them, and I know that they're like, what the hell's going on? Like,
I feel
it,
like that was a test for you because my like natural personality, I would have been like, you want me to ignore them? Not happening. Like I probably would
well,
have rebelled against
I,
that a
I,
little
I,
bit.
I did talk to them, but I would keep it short because
Hmm.
I know that, like, because I was under pain of, if you disobey, this is a sin, and like being
I know,
young.
I know, I know the struggle you were going through. I
So,
know that internal struggle.
but later on, years later, I'm already a professed. I get permission from Father Bing through my brother to go to his wedding. I go to the wedding from the Philippines. I go with another brother to LA, and everything's going great. But we have a phone, so I'm texting one of the other oath members who is at that time in Nebraska, and he's sending us messages from Mother Agnes to send to me. So it's like we're doing all this cross communication, and Mother Agnes is saying, "How dare Brother Joseph," which was my name back then. "How dare Brother Joseph go home and be with his family? He's disobeying." No, and I remember correctly. It says something like, "No other members are given this privilege to go home whenever they want and to be with their family." And in my mind, I was like, I didn't know the word for gaslighting, but it's like, I
Hmm.
mean, I was just so like confused because I could have swore that I've seen some of the other members go home and see families. But like you said, you wanted to touch that a bit more about
Yeah,
that
I
in the
would say like as far as like my time in there and even those like that came to the United States internationally, right? Like we had people from Tonga, we had people from England, from Ireland that came to the United States for their postulancy and then eventually ended up in the Philippines. Yeah, I would say that they tried to 110% limit any type of communication, any type of events, so on and so forth, whether it was a death in the family, whether it was a marriage, it didn't matter what those life events were. If at all possible, if they didn't even have to tell you about them, they would prefer not for you to know. I think it all kind of came down to what outside pressure they were getting and how they could kind of balance that pressure to like allowing. So maybe in your case, obviously with your brother being part of this and or you being there and your brother being on the outside but still having that affiliation and maybe knowing the people that you knew at that time were part of the order, they kind of had to you know weigh their decision of like, hey, it's probably makes more sense for us just to allow him to go. So and we'll send a brother alongside of him. So I'll tell you, there's never been one encounter that I've ever remember from anything happening traveling outside that they did not send another brother or sister with that
yeah.
person, and that was their means of damage control. Just as far as like, yep, let them know they got someone by their side,
So,
the
so
whole
I
time.
so I did go, but then I got accused of And this is another thing, like false accusations. I'm accused of disobeying, and the funny thing is that Father Bing is the one who gave the permission. He gave the blessing, and then like now, so when I went back to the Philippines, it was then again like kind of like similar to what you're saying. You have to be separated from the community. You have to be on silence. I had to do hard work, and there's just like so much blame, so much guilt. Um, did you feel at any point like when you miss your family, or like let's say you spoke to your family, did you ever feel kind of guilty at any times for
Yeah,
feeling those
100,
things?
yeah, 100%. Like in any time that though, and please understand, those are very normal feelings for what we were in. So, but the point is, the reason why they wanted you to feel guilt if you were feeling that way, it's all about how they could control your emotions, how far they could see, they could test you, basically how far they could bend you to see how far you'd go without breaking, right? I remember specifically the same superior that you're mentioning, you know, she really, she was, it was two people when you were with her, different sides. Okay. And I share this in my blog. She did allow me to go to a lot of missions. I did get to go and travel internationally, to England, to Ireland. I even got to go to Rome, when Father B was speaking at these big conventions. Okay. Looking back, I think it's twofold. I think I was a face that they could kind of market in the community. Respectfully, there was a lot of Filipinos in this order. So for me, to go to, and the other person, it wasn't just me, there was a sister that they would bring, Sister O, that would come with me as well, which she was, her native country, was England. So she was kind of going back to her home roots. But the difference with her, I saw more flexibility, what they allowed with her, but it was because both her mother and her grandmother were very devout third orders of them. So they kind of knew that there was no real risk. But this gal joined when she was 14 years old. 14. Like
It's
I think she was the youngest that ever joined, and I believe she officially like came on when she was 13. But she was 14 when I met her. So for us to go to England
yeah,
and Ireland and our blonde hair and blue eyes and vibrant, spirit, uh, it was almost like a recruiting movement that they did
yeah.
there. They would do their ministries, they would do it, but they would try to penetrate the youth at these events as well, similar to kind of what I experienced, what you experienced, whether it was through an adore, whether it was through, World Youth Day. It doesn't matter. It was just any type of event. Now, I will tell you, that I want to share this with you because this really will kind of open up another avenue that I think is important for us to discuss when it comes to like a little bit of fear. Okay. So I'll never forget this. I always, like I mentioned, like they kind of had to see how far they could bend me before I would break, but I'm definitely not an easy one to break, and I just wasn't one that surrendered. So I got a lot of like heavy penances. I got a lot of days of silence. I got a lot of like not being able to join in recreation because it's just in my nature to question. So I remember they had a like deliverance ministry event, and it was in England. Okay. Now, I remember this specifically. It's when Harry Potter was really becoming a big thing. Okay. And one of the things that the Alliance often talked about was their deliverance ministry, right? And with their priests being exorcist priests. So at this time, we had already been introduced to like what hexes are, what curses are, so on and so forth. I remember this is what got me, kind of clicked me to go to my novitiate on the next step. So myself and Sister O were at this event in England, and they were having people talk about what they dabbled in with their life, right? And so in England, there is a lot of like what they would call like witchcraft, or what they saw as witchcraft, like Reiki healing. There was the Harry Potter thing that took place, and these people were, some of them got involved in like voodoo, and like some pretty different things. And so I remember at that time, I was really wanting to like leave, like I was wanting to like go home. And it was more like I was internalizing this. Like I didn't really share it because I learned very quickly, be careful what thoughts you share. right?
Yeah.
So like I kind of learned that really quickly. But anyways, I'll never forget this. This lady was talking about how she dabbled into like voodoo. She dabbled into all this like witchcraft thing, because she was doing it, the voodoo, out of anger towards like this ex that she had. And I remember she was sharing her testimony. Okay. And at the end, I remember Father B did a long exorcism. Okay. It was my first time seeing it done in a public setting. Like we all had it when we were like internally in postulancy and so on and so forth, right? And so one of the things that like we've mentioned over and over on this interview is talking about being in crisis, right? And talking about being hexed and being cursed. And they also used a term called being infested. So when you were
Yes.
infested, it means that you opened some part of your soul, to where you're kind of playing with the devil, so to speak, right? And so during this long exorcism, he's going on and he's praying this in Latin. And I remember like literally saying to myself, like, I want to go home. Like, I don't think I'm meant to be here. Like, that was just my whole thought that kept like going over and over the whole time I was at this event, right? Like, I'm still there with a smile. And as they did this exorcism and they're praying, okay, it was the first time I ever seen anything like it. This lady that was there started screaming at the top of her lungs, and she was holding her neck like this, screaming, and she was like 3 inches off the ground, pinned against the wall. Okay. And I got totally freaked out. And I was like, God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Like, whatever this is, I don't want to know. I just never want to do anything to jeopardize what's just happening. Like, it's the first time fear got embedded into me of like being possessed, right? Like, and for me, I was like, am I going crazy here? Like, is this lady really pinned against the wall? If she off the ground? Like, there's no physical thing holding her there, right? And I remember afterwards, I went to Sister O and I was like, did you just see what I saw? Did you just see what I saw? Did you just see what I saw? Like I was panicking, and she's like, like she was scared. Okay, so like after that, that was kind of that breaking point, that hold on me of like, okay, I need to get a little bit of this, like, I don't want to say rebellion, but like, I need to get it in check of like, okay, I don't ever want that to happen to me. That was the scariest thing that I ever witnessed. And they talked about that, right? They talked about like, if you leave or you get infested, like, they believe that they would teach us that mental facilities, psych wards, were not really people that had mental disorders. They were possessed by some type of spirit, right? So they they really incorporated in that fear of the devil, right? That fear of like being infested, that fear of, whatever it was, being possessed. And I just remember that was a turning point for me of like, okay, Lord, I promise I won't do anything, like just protect me from that. But that was where they got a stronger hold on me, was after that. And whatever that was or whatever I witnessed, and with Sister O telling me she saw it, that also scared me because I was hoping I just was imagining it, it wasn't a real thing. And I think for the both of us, it kind of had that impact of like we were terrified, you know. And I remember after the event, like we would go back and, Father B would like do a deliverance on us and, shower us with holy water to like get everything away from us. And I remember having a manifestation after that and trying to discuss and talk about that. And really what it was incorporated was, this is God showing you that like, this is what happens when you're not careful. This is what happens when you're not following, and so again, I know that was a manipulation tactic, but for somebody seeing something that they've been told, you know what I mean? And you've been taught, and then to see it pan out in real life, that was terrifying for me, I'll be honest. I was like, whoa, like this whole spiritual warfare, okay, this is real, But it's just one of those things where I kind of took a step back. And when I decided I wanted to leave, I no longer was like focusing on my desire to leave. It was kind of like, let's just focus on the next step. So after that encounter was when we were basically sent to the Philippines after that to kind of begin our novitiate. And for me, that was probably one of the biggest culture shocks that I had to go through. I don't know what your environment was like, but I kind of want to paint a picture of what we walked in, if you're okay with that.
Sure.
So we got sent to what was like a compound. So it wasn't just our batch got separated, right? Because we got put in different orders, right? So not all of the people I was with went with me to the Philippines. We were kind of separated. But out of the batch that I was with, I believe there was four of us, maybe five, but four of us went to the same institute, right? And I remember we arrived in this compound, and when we got to the compound, we were introduced to our mother superior. And I just remember like her being very, very intense. Like you could feel her energy as soon as you got there. And then we were met with others that had done their postulancy in the Philippines. So now we were like a batch of over 20 collectively for our novitiate. Primarily of them, we were the foreigners. You know what I mean? We were people that were coming now to their country. And the crazy part was, I remember the first thing that we were strictly given is we were not allowed to speak English. We were only allowed to speak Tagalog. And I mean, in postulancy, they did speak Tagalog quite frequently because the mother superiors were Filipino, but that was like a really like kind of tough thing to like grasp. So one thing I did is I always like wrote words in notebooks, but what I did intentionally end up saving me, Ryan, it literally is what saved my life and got me out of this order, is I could understand it and I did learn it, but I never outwardly expressed that I actually understood it. So I always purposely struggled to speak it because for me, what that became, it became kind of my lifeline. Because when they were speaking Tagalog and they didn't think that I could understand, I did understand, but I didn't share that I understood because I'm kind of getting preemptive, but this was kind of a survival technique that I adapted and I hung on to as things progressed. So one, it was like really strict of trying to get you out of the culture. What you learned in postulancy as far as like fasting and sleep and schedules, take that times 10 in novitiate. So like our fasting schedule. Now, the other thing I need to mention, the order that I was with, from hearing other people and talking, about their experience, we were with the most strict superior in order out of the alliance in the female institutions for sure. Yep. So that's kind of, I was with the Sith. Yep, the Sith. So, our general superior that oversaw all of the Sith members was Mother A, the same one that you've been mentioning that had been giving you a hard time. She's the one that oversaw everything. She's the one I was referring to you with that kind of, you know, knew what she was doing as far as like what she used me for and used Sister O for. But the novitiate superior we got, for whatever reason, made my life hell. This lady did not like me. She found every reason to just make sure my life was going to be hell. I remember there we were given the first time we needed to like. Culture shock was A, going to a whole new country. B, it was so hot when we got there and like so muggy. And when we got to our spot of where we were like supposed to set up and camp out, we were given a mat, like a thin mat like that. And it was laid flat on like a concrete floor. And that's what we all slept on. No pillow, no blanket, a mat on a concrete floor. Also, like our fasting schedule was extremely strict. We pretty much fasted all week and just got a feast day on Sunday. So it was pretty much bread and water. And even on those feast days, it was like fish or rice or, something to that nature. So obviously you and I can have this conversation today, 15, 20 years,
Yeah.
looking forward. And basically what they did is they just took those control mechanisms and they ramped them up, right? They put that pedal on the metal. And so the other thing that they did in doing that is they manipulated and controlled situations that way because they knew people were tired, they knew people were hungry, they knew people were like out of their comfort zone. And so they kind of pinned like people against each other too. That's what I kind of started realizing was taking place. But in regards to like sleep schedule when we got there, it was 3 hours, 3 hours max that you got of sleep. And the difference that happened there, and I don't know if you experienced this, but one of the things he was big on is teaching St. John Bosco, right? And St. John Bosco's biggest thing he always talked about is, run, play, but don't sin, right? So what they incorporated in our novitiate is they incorporated what they call the Don Bosco system, but it really wasn't. I don't believe if we talk to Don Bosco today, this is what he intended it for. But we were assigned 3 sisters in our novitiate that were called assistants. Okay. You had assistant A, assistant B, and assistant C. And their jobs were literally to guard you to make sure you don't what?
Sin.
Sin. Right. So like I remember, and we can kind of laugh at this now, but I remember like morning prayers, right? Like let's say I had 3 hours of sleep and I'm like sleeping, I'm dozing off. They'd literally poke and prod us to wake up, And like the thing about it was you had one that was the poke and prodder, like they all had different like roles.
That's
And
the assistant
ultimately,
B.
yeah. And
Yeah.
ultimately that assistant, it was either assistant A or assistant C, I can't remember, but one of them was like the tattletale. That was the one that was like telling them everything, like pretty much everything
C.
C. I'm pretty sure it was C. And so you know, this is also where we were introduced to more physical penances. So we were slowly introduced in postulancy, and they would use saints like that would talk about the ones that were like the hairy wool things and, flagellations and so on and so forth. But it got to the point in novitiate, like where they were incorporating more physical punishment. So, like, let's say, for example, we were struggling with sleeping or something like that. We were given what's called disciplinary measures, DMs. Okay. And for every disciplinary measure, if you carried that out with obedience, it kind of like wiped out what your offense was. And I remember the first time I was given a disciplinary measure of flagellations. This was different than I ever had been introduced to. And, this might be a little trigger for some people, but basically what happened is, in postulancy, when it was a flagellation, you were given a belt and you could kind of test that yourself. You were the one that was like flagellating yourself. So you kind of had control over the pain. I remember, I don't know exactly what I did, but the first time I was introduced, they brought out this rope. Okay, it was like these ropes that probably were tied like 5 foot, and they burnt like knots on the end of each of these ropes. Okay, and then they tied them together. And then what would happen is as you would like flagellate yourself from side to side, you would feel these knots like hit your back, right? Well, what would happen is, let's say we were given a DM of 50 flagellations or like whatever it was. This time you had an assistant that was like watching you as you did it, that would say, hey, this is efficient, or no, this is not what it's meant to be. And I remember specifically, as we're talking about flagellations, and I talk about this in my blog, there was some weird encounter, and I believe that it was never true. I believe it was a mechanism to just kind of break me down. But there was a rumor that my parents had like gotten a hold of the bishops in the US, and so they were worried about it. And so the superior requested that I go to the chapel, kneel on the kneeler, and she was going to flagellate me to offer up this thing, because they were always worried about what bishops were finding out and what was happening. I mean, they were always worried about this outside entity finding out, but they made it seem like it's because they were following, strictly, the Catholic faith in its true nature, and these other ones were like new age people, right? So it was always about persecution and so on and so forth. But I'll never forget this. So I knelt down, and this time I didn't have control over the flagellations, the Mother Superior did. And I was flagellated hundreds of times, to the point where like I remember in my mind, I was like, I will not let them break me. I don't care how bad this hurts. I will not let them break me. And I remember just like you become numb to it. But it got to the point where she missed like a couple times, and I remember getting hit in the face, and actually having like a full-fledged black eye. And I remember after it was done and they were like, you're going to offer this up, like I remember trying to sleep at night like on the mat, and my shirt was sticking to the open like wounds on my back. And I remember it's just so tough, because I remember thinking like, what has this like come to, but at the same time, like now it's even worse. Now you're in a third world country. And not to mention, are you not only in a third world country, I am blonde haired and blue eyed. Like I have a big target on my back in a third world country, because if people were to see me, they see me as a dollar sign, right? They see me as an American. They see me as, what it was. But the other thing I had was this fear of what I saw when I went on the mission, And I remember like trying to sleep that night feeling so broken of like, I can't believe that this has happened. And I remember like sisters coming to me that were like taking a risk, asking if I was okay, because what I feel they did is they made an example out of me to scare the others in the batch of like, hey, this is what happens if you kind of, they use people as an example to break other people, so to speak. And so, that was just one of the many things that kind of took place. And, there was more strict DMs than even that. I remember one time, like, I was punished by giving a pair of scissors, and I had to cut the entire grass with a pair of scissors, like multiple hours. It took me during the week with just like the hot heat, beating on you. It was just all about how they could use that spiritual abuse, like you mentioned. That's exactly what it was. How they could use this faith, use this mention. It's like you're just enduring this, because you're just at that point. It was like I so wanted to follow God's will, but there's that also part of me, like I feel like you experienced like that you were questioning like what is this, and how far does this go? And I mean, I don't know, it was just from lack of food, lack of sleep. And it was like and they wanted you to witness the other people's pain as well, right? They wanted you to witness the struggle, because when you witness that struggle and that pain and what happened to them, they knew they could collectively continue to control the circumstance. So I don't know if there's any other questions, like specifically. It's like those are when it kind of gets tough to talk about for other people, because I know they can't imagine reliving what they went through. And I'm just trying to give you the surface level sides of things that you can kind of imagine. Well, if they, flagellated you hundreds of times, what more could they have done? I know one punishment that I received too, was like, it was the longest that I was given pretty much without food. I was only given water. And it was a little over 5 days. I hadn't ate anything. I was only on 3 hours of sleep. And it's for whatever reason, I feel personally, because I've talked to some other people about this, I feel like for whatever reason, that novitiate mother superior thought that she like had something to prove, like she thought that she had something. I think part of it was she would always like make digs and comments at like basically, you Americans, it was like I don't know how to explain it. She definitely had like
Mother
some
A.
type of no, this is Mother E. And Mother E literally, when I tell you like my life was made hell for 2 years straight, like uh, hell. Like I remember just the penances just got more and more intense. Like I remember being in San Jose Nueva Ecija, and it was like a compound that we were all sent to. And there they had what was called a rosary walk. I don't know if you've been there,
Yeah.
but it was rocks. The whole walk was rocks, and these rocks got
Spiky rocks.
There's spiky rocks, and they got really, really hot. Like the temperature got really, really hot. And one of our disciplinary measures was that we were going to walk this rosary walk barefoot. So we had to remove our shoes. We had to walk on these like sharp, like it was almost like walking on glass. Literally, these rocks were like so sharp and so hot. And I remember me personally, like when it was done and it was over with, like my feet were like blistered, like I couldn't walk on them for like I don't know how long that it took. Another thing that happened, and it was partly like it was definitely accidental and somewhat self-inflicted. We went to it was myself and Sister O that I mentioned to you, and we went on some, I don't know, I don't even remember what it was. It's some type of mission thing they allowed us to go into when we were in the Philippines. And somehow we didn't drink, we brushed our teeth with contaminated water that we didn't realize was contaminated. But literally we almost died over this situation. So I kind of talk about it briefly too, but what happened was we got I think they called it like amoeba or amoebiasis, like amoebiasis. It's like this severe bacteria that gets in. And what was happening was after we did it, suddenly I wasn't feeling very well. And like I was sweating and I was getting this like god awful like tightness in my stomach, and I like felt feverish, and like I would either throw up or like diarrhea. Like it was just terrible. And I was begging after like a week of enduring this. Like I remember taking the sheet that we were given and I ripped the sheet up and I tied it around my stomach because I had pain so bad. Well, thankfully, we were at an event where all of the order, like we were all together, all of the novitiates, and one of the superiors that I actually got close to when I was in Nebraska with a different order saw me and saw how terrible I looked, that she went to Mother A directly and was like, if you don't get her somewhere, like I'm gonna get her somewhere. So they did take us to a doctor, thankfully, after like it was like 7 days of pure misery. And that doctor basically said, like, if we didn't get the medication, and we had to take this medication for a very, very long time, that like amoeba that we get can get in your blood cells to your brain and literally kill you.
Die.
But I got down to, I was like a solid, like soaking wet. I was about 98 pounds during my novitiate, which is very, very, very undersized for like my natural body type. So it just kind of goes to show you. So for me, for whatever reason, the order that I was with, they did way more intense punishments, I found out, than, what other people were kind of going through. For me, I feel like it's because most of the superiors were narcissists.
Oh yeah,
looking
yeah.
back, looking back. So I feel like that's kind of why it happened. But I mean, like, I remember stories from like we were trying to, we had to hand wash our clothes and none of us had known how to hand wash. I remember like our knuckles were bleeding, they were raw,
Yeah.
like, our clothes didn't smell properly because we just didn't know, like, didn't smell good because we didn't know how to properly do things. It was just like,
And
it
it's also the humiliation because it's like
was
uh,
100% humiliation. Yeah. And
they
I
knew
remember,
it's like they
oh, go
knew they
ahead.
were it's like they know they're setting us up for failure, but I feel that some superiors, I believe that maybe there was an aspect of either racism or maybe just a hatred for those of another country, xenophobia or
I think it
something
was more they thought that we got I can't remember what they used to say in Tagalog, but basically like we were privileged, in
like a
Tagalog it would translate to like spoiled. I don't know exactly how, like a
like
spoiled brat.
like a
Um
jealousy.
yeah, it's like it's definitely like a jealousy. But I think the other thing that they couldn't stand is like I felt a sense of obligation, and I'm very transparent this in my blog. I'm very transparent with this when I talk to people, to protect. So that sister that I mentioned to you, she entered at a very, very young age, and I watched her struggle through novitiate, and I watched her go through that crucial age of growing up. I was a little bit older then, to the point where I remember like I would not eat my bread, and I would hide my bread so that she could actually get more bread. And I remember like doing things like that. And I think, I got caught one time where I didn't eat my meal and they caught me not eating my meal and giving it to her. and they didn't like for them that was a threat. Like, how dare you, but for me it was hypocritical. I'm like, you're talking about sacrificing, you're talking about offering. What's the difference if I'm offering something up so that my sister can be taken care, so there's like conflicting things that I just started to like kind of see and question. But I'll be honest with you, when you were in the Philippines, it was straight survival mode. You weren't really thinking about leaving or whatever. You were just thinking about how the hell am I going to survive and get myself through this day to the next day. I mean, honestly, that's like what it, became of. And it's interesting because for me, I had developed, and it's probably been the most hurtful, but I developed a really, really close relationship with Mother A. She kind of was the one that really made the decision to recruit me over to the Sith. I was actually supposed to be going to the Limb, and she recruited me over to the Sith and basically said, I see a special calling in you, and so on and so forth. And it was all about manipulation. But what was tough for me is when she would get me one on one, and I would go to the mission, like the missions and things. I saw a completely different side of her. Like I saw this like kind of gave you this glimpse of like, oh, she's actually human, she's caring, she, so on and so forth. And then like as soon as we got back to that community, it was like, how can I humiliate her, to the max? But for example, like she came to the Philippines after the novitiate and like not after, like during the novitiate or whatever, and she made a trip and like I often wonder, does she know what's really happening here? Does she really know like how evil? I mean, it's literally how evil and
It's
how
evil.
mean and how torturous, these novitiate superiors and assistants, were at that time. And, she often led you to believe that she didn't, but that she was there to advocate for you and that you were going to grow and you were going to develop. But then what started happening is like right when you're kind of thinking you're getting traction, they always threw a massive curveball. So I don't know if you were with the Alliance when this happened, but this happened during my novitiate and is something that we need to greatly speak on. Father B was doing the missions and he was talking about he always talked about conspiracy theories, so to speak. And one of them he talked about was the eugenics movement and, how people like myself with blonde hair and blue eyes, like we're the superior race and, blah, blah, blah. It's like all this like conspiracy type thing. But they also believed wholeheartedly that there was attack happening on the Catholic Church and that they were meant and called to be the remnant church. Okay. And by remnant church, they were the ones that were going to be victorious. They also talked about when 9/11 hit, how, that was a conspiracy there. And this isn't stuff I'm making up. This is stuff he actually shared on recorded videos if you dive in and take a look at this. But he also believed that a World War III was going to take place and we were on the verge of it and brink of it. When things started getting to the point of like when I tell you survival, we had reached that point. So in this compound in San Jose Nueva Ecija, they built what was called a dungeon. And I talk about this in my blog, but basically what they did is we were in the basement of this cathedral. We had no electricity, pretty much like no access to just free flowing water, anything like that. And we were being tested to survive pretty much what they are calling the end times. And that's when life for me, if I ever was pushed to the extreme limits that I've ever been pushed in my entire life, it was during that time period. We were not allowed to talk with anyone. It was hot. They had like boarded up the windows. They had put like black plastic bags all over the windows. We had adoration 24/7 exposed. For us to be able to get any type of power, they like took batteries, like car batteries, and they like wired them all up. And we had to like rotate times of like pedaling this bike that kept these batteries charged. Like, I know it sounds absolutely crazy and asinine, but like this was like our life. Like, and we were stuck and we were trapped and we were just like engulfed. And I remember like thinking to myself, how the heck did I go from meeting these people in a youth group, going to World Youth Day, to now literally locked in a freaking dungeon, pedaling a bike, fighting for my life, this is what we did. And I'm just telling you, I mean, you imagine 5 years, I'm just trying to give the surface level like
Mm,
picture of what it was, but I assure you
it's
it's
cr-
crazier than that, you
it,
know?
it's crazy, and just it's just hearing someone else, because for the longest time, especially like when I first started speaking up, and not even speaking up like publicly, but like to friends or like, ex members a bit too, like even kind of just talking a bit about that, it was like, oh, like don't talk about that, like, or like kind of like I would feel like, am I making this up? Like, did I just
You think you're
imagine
crazy.
this?
You think you're, and you know what? I remember. So I got to tell you, Ryan, um, after being in this dungeon, and this dungeon wasn't something that lasted for just days or weeks. This was months, nearly a year. We were entrapped in this dungeon. I got to the point where I was like, I got to either fight for my life or I'm gonna die here. I mean, I'm sincere. That's the point that I got. So, in my blog, I talk about this too, but I literally planned in my head, how can I escape this hellhole? Like, how can I do it? You know? And so one of the superiors that was in there, they had cell phone access. Like they did get to have cell phones because that's how they communicated with like Mother A and the outside like superiors, right? They did have communication. So I decided, Ryan, that I was going to plan to steal this cell phone and get to service and call someone back home to be like, send everyone you know, because that's the point I got to. Like I got to that point of like, even the fear that was instilled in me, even the, all the things that I saw, like I got to the point that this something is severely wrong here. And if I don't escape now, I'm never, like I really thought I was going to die there if I didn't get out of there. And so long story short, I stole this cell phone and I climbed this big cathedral building trying to get a cell phone tower, and I ended up getting caught. Okay, I get busted. And I was like, I think my life is over because I just literally did the ultimate, like, worst thing of like rebellion. Like I did, you know? Um, and so after that, I was put in like this small section of where they were, and I was not allowed to speak to anyone. Like I wasn't allowed to like move this. And I was told that Mother A was going to be coming immediately because at that point, like I already was like, I gotta go. Like I gotta get out of here. I don't care what I have to do. Like I didn't care. Like I didn't care if I was going crazy. I didn't care if I, missed my vocation. All of that like never came to my mind. It was this reality of like what my life had become of like, I got to get out of here because I saw how it broke the other people around me. Like I saw people that were strong and were surviving, and I saw them literally like turn into a mental puddle of like goop. Like they just couldn't think for themselves. And do you blame them? Like, do you blame them? They've been pushed to their absolute max with no food, no sleep, like all of this. And so I remember I was told to pack my bag, and I thought that I was going to go talk to Mother A. I was like, this is good. I just need to get out of this dungeon. Like, I need to whatever. Well, what happened is I got picked up by what they call like a kuya, what, right? Like in Tagalog, it's
A,
like, I
a,
don't know if it's
a bro, a homie,
a
like a bro.
bro. Yeah. And I was taken. I have no idea where exactly I was taken, but I was taken to this like one bedroom like shack. And I'm like, where am I? And I knew I was on some type of property like that the Alliance was on, but I had no idea where I was actually at in the Philippines. And so it was like this one bedroom shack that was like a room that had like kind of like a cot in a toilet, but I wouldn't really call it a toilet. And it was like a door that was closed, that was locked from the outside. And I ended up being there locked for what felt like an eternity. And so the I would get food if and when it was dropped off. There was like a little bell that was rang, and I remember like trying to like see like who it was, like I just remember like I got to that point of like I am physically locked up. Like I am locked up in a cell. Like I felt like I was in a jail, and it was one you couldn't escape. The way that it was locked from the outside. And I just remember like talking to myself, and I really, really like used writing as my means of like keeping my mind, because the whole thing I told myself is, listen, they can break me physically, you know, they can, torture what they did, but the thing that I have that they can't take is this, and I can't let go of that, right? Like I have to fight for that. Well, long story short, I kind of talked about that, but eventually I was released from there, and I was taken to Manila in the Philippines, where they were like mainly kind of stationed. And they told me I was going back there for a mental evaluation. I was going to see a psychiatric doctor. Now, granted, this was all in the Philippines. So remember when I mentioned to you kind of earlier that the whole time I was kind of punished because I acted like I didn't know how to speak Tagalog and I didn't understand. So I was remember going to this medical facility, and I remember talking to this doctor. It was a Filipino female. Um, it was a female, it was a psychiatric doctor, but there's part of me that's like, you don't know who to trust. You don't know what's going on. But I remember like having a conversation with this doctor, and she was asking me certain things, and I was like, listen, I didn't spill the beans on them. I didn't tell them that life was crazy. All I said to her is, listen, I'm in a foreign country. I miss my family. I miss my home. I just want to go back home. That's all I said, right? And so after having a conversation, I remember her meeting with the two superiors that brought me, and it wasn't Mother A, it was another superior. But anyways, they were dissecting conversation, right? And so after they had conversation, I was actually able to understand the conversation that they were dissecting, because they didn't think they really didn't truly think that I understood it. And long story short, she was advocating for me of like, hey, basically she was saying like she's from a first world country. She's here in the Philippines, like basically this is, normal reaction to what she's going through, so on and so forth. Well, they took me back to the main missionary house in the Philippines, in Lagoon, in Manila, sorry, in Manila. So that's like the one where like Mother A and Father B would stay when they would come. And so when they came back to break it down, they told me that the psychiatrist, or whatever they called it, psychology doctor, said that I'm having a mental breakdown, and that I'm going crazy, and that, basically trying to tell me that I've lost my marbles, you know? And for me, it was because I kept begging God while I was there. I kept praying to God, like, just show me the truth, just show me the truth, like, show me a way, like, show me a way. Because I really did believe, not that I believed in my heart, but I could not see a way out of this place. Especially when we were locked in that when it got to like being locked in the dungeon and it got that far, I'm like, if it's gone this far, what's next, And anyways, I remember that was the clarity that I needed for myself, to know that what I see is what I see, and I need to fight. And how I ended up escaping this place was that I basically hijacked an opportunity that I was going to pretend or try and to call home. Okay. Because I knew that their biggest fear that they had with any of us in that order is what was going to be told or shown to the outside world. Right. And so at this time, Mother A was not there, Father B was not there. It was just the superior of that house. So what happened was, when I got there, again, after this whole meeting, they told me I was going crazy. They changed the environment. Okay. They try to make this environment now like a welcoming place. Okay. Like laughter, like, things like that. Because what they want you to believe is, hey, that was just a test we put you through. They don't want you to think that that's reality. That was just a test, right? Like everything was a test. And so what I did is during this time period that I was supposed to be cleaning, I knew there was a landline phone in the office space. And I remember dialing out. I can't remember what it was, but I was like, I think it was like code, it was code one. There was some type of code you had to dial internationally. And so what happened was I plotted that I was going to make this phone call. And what happened was when I got there, it was a huge risk. I was so nervous the whole time because I was like, I don't know what's going to happen to me if they catch me, you know? And I knew I had one shot. Well, when I went to call and I tried to dial internationally, it didn't go through. Like I couldn't call, it wouldn't go. And the superior came down and they were like, she was yelling at Tagalog at the other one. And all I did was just basically continue like I was having a conversation. I was like, I'm located here in Manila. Please help me. Please send someone here. Like, this is where I'm at, you know, blah. I just started BSing. It was just like my natural instinct. I just like BS'd on this phone. Like I just got a hold of someone and they were coming back. And so after that happened, that's like the one loophole of vulnerability I knew I had over them is if I could make it seem like I just blasted something to the outside world, now they're going to have to backtrack and figure this out. And that was like my last straw of kind of survival through 5 years of just ups and downs of like emotion and, you know, what was good, what was bad, and so on and so forth. And it's crazy. It was the first time after I made that call, I saw fear in their eyes. I saw the fear they instilled, I saw in their own eyes. And it wasn't within probably 4 days, Mother A was at the house with Father Bing. And basically what they allowed me to do after I mean, I lied the whole time and I lied for a good purpose and I'll lie. I always speak that. I mean, I didn't get a hold of anyone. I didn't physically get through, but I made them believe that I did. And so, they were going to send me back home and they want to send me back home with a sister. And I said, you can send me back home and a sister can fly, but there will not be a sister with me when I like meet my family, you know? And it was this whole like back and forth type thing, but I knew I had
With
leverage.
Father Bing?
This was Mother A. So
Okay.
Father B was always kind of clever with me, I feel like he was always that spiritual principal guidance, but he didn't really ever get himself involved on like the hairy side of things. Like he always allowed the superiors to do that, where he just kind of sat back as like that spiritual guider, you know, like he was just trying to give the advice without like, I don't know, you know, really, but I don't know. I think it was his way. Like for me, I used to question that of like, does he just not know? Like, do you not know this is what they're doing to all these people? Like, do you not know the people underneath you are doing these things to the brothers, to the sisters? Like, do you not know that? You know, and because they painted him and we all saw him as this incredibly holy figure, like literally next to like what you would imagine what they put a saint on a pedestal, like that's where they had him. So I was like, if this guy is like this, there's no way he knows, you know, what's happening from the top and trickling all the way down, you know. And so I feel like they purposely tried to separate him, right, from like the other like I don't know, like the relationships or like the communication that we had with the superiors on like a local. They try to like focus it more there, right, as if they could kind of sit back. And I believe they use that as a manipulation tactic. Like I believe the conversations I had with Mother A, she knew damn well what was happening to us there. And it wouldn't be my surprise if she wasn't ordering that type of stuff to happen. But then she kind of got to come in as this role of like this motherly figure of like, you know, it was just like a vicious cycle of like psychological abuse, spiritual abuse, physical abuse. And so, long story short, I ended up getting back home. And just because I got back home and I landed, my journey didn't end there. You know, I would say that was the hardest part of my journey. And, you know, as crazy as this is gonna sound, even me being back and like, you know, they wanted me to tell them that I was going back just for a doctor's appointment. And they wanted me to tell them that, you know, they wanted me to have the mentality of, hey, I'm coming back. I get to spend time with you, but I'm going back. And the crazy part was Mother A really dug her claws into me pretty deep when I went back, and she tried so hard to kind of get me to go back, and they used all the fear. I mean, they told me I was going to go crazy. They told they told all the sisters. I found this out later. They told all the sisters that I was with that I went crazy and I ended up in a mental institute. And they told them that because they were scared. They wanted them to be scared of, hey, if anybody tries to rebel the way that she just rebelled, because these sisters wanted to know what happened to me, right? Like all of a sudden I was there. They knew I kind of lost my shit, so to speak, and I was going to do whatever it took to get out because I watched them literally. I watched some of the people that I would consider strong, ones that I didn't think they could break, and I watched them break them. And I'm like, this is scary. This is literally life or death. And so I'll tell you, it was even tough because after I got back into like the real world, I wasn't in the real world. I mean, you just go from this wild experience. How do you say, hey, mom and dad, this is just what I went through? Like you can't say that. But people knew around me something was wrong because I came back 98 pounds. I came back, I couldn't sleep without a light on,
Yeah.
because they always talked about the darkness. I couldn't sleep without a light on. I constantly battled the thoughts of like, I don't know where to begin. I don't know who I am. Oh my God, am I a misfit? Like all of these things that they told me and they incorporated in my head, I battled with that like very, very strongly. But you know what? God is faithful and He never let me down. Even in the midst of that, and even in Mother A trying to get me to go back, which I almost did. That's the crazy thing, Ryan. I almost did. That's how much control and manipulation that they did have. But what happened to me is like little things happened in life where God led me to certain moments where He kept giving me the signs that I needed to stay strong, and embrace it. And one thing that I want to share is that I ended up deciding a couple years later to go to a March for Life. I'd never been to a March for Life, and it was in Washington, D.C. And in my decision to go to that, I was invited. I actually ran in to another sister who was part of the Alliance organization, not part of the Sith. She was part of the Lim Order, and she was from Australia. Okay, we didn't even know each other's real names because you weren't really allowed to know people's real names, right? They gave you
Mhm.
like a religious name that you went by. And anyways, I ended up crossing paths with her, and she was with another order at the time, and she begged me to please meet with this order to tell them about our story because she slowly began sharing hers, and she's like, she didn't think anyone believed her, you know? And I will forever be grateful for this order. I spent a year with them, not discerning my vocation. I just spent a year with them, and they helped us get some psychological help, like as far as plugging us in with some really good psychologists that focused on like the cognitive behavior therapy. A lot of this was like donated. Our treatment was donated and paid for. One of the things we did agree to do is allow them to use some of the mechanisms that they tested as like they got to use that as research, right? They kind of got to use that data, and we had to like, okay that. But one thing I will tell you, and I tell you this 100% confidently, how I know that that order used brainwashing is when they did the testing. They did some with like electrodes where they measure like, your brain waves and certain things like that. And they always talk about when it comes to, I didn't know the details of it, but basically when it comes down to like brainwashing, there's certain patterns that follow the same like trend. And it was very much that. So a lot of questions that they asked, we had similar trends in our initial thoughts, right? That would
Mhm.
come. Granted, we could stop those thoughts and we could kind of, readdress them, but the natural like response was definitely brainwashing. But a year I spent with them, it also gave me, I got to see what religious life really was. I got to see what an order was outside of like this intense, crazy experience that I just had. And I got to 100% discern, and I got to that point in my life where, I just spent a year of going through therapy and things like that. I spent a year I went on missions with them. So what they did is they went to like inner city school or any inner cities like the Bronx, like Philadelphia, and they would put on summer programs for youth to give them a safe option to stay out of trouble, during the summer. So I got to see religious life in its fullness and its beauty, and I appreciated it. And they were so much help in giving me the healing I needed to see from that. But it also gave me clarity that as much as I love that mission, that I was never meant to be a
Mhm.
religious. That wasn't my calling. Like I always had a desire to have kids, like to get married. Like that was always on my heart. So that year was probably the crucial healing that I needed to really like come to peace within myself of like it's okay, like I can live a life fulfilled outside of the religious, and I knew that that wasn't my calling. And the crazy part was the sister that I was with, she also discovered that about herself during that time period. And I've been in contact with her. She's great. She's doing great things on the outside. So it's beautiful to see kind of her journey and what's helped her. And it's like my biggest culture shock too from, coming out of a place like that is getting connected on social media.
Mhm.
Like social media was a big thing. That's like when Facebook was coming on and so on and so forth. But I got to share this beautiful thing because this is how good
Yeah.
God is. And this is the redemption story. When I got back and everything I prayed for after I was with this order for a year and whole 9 yards, I got a random Facebook messenger. I just had gotten on Facebook not that long ago. And this messenger was from, I looked at this picture, this sweet little old lady, and it said, if you're Katie and your mom is Amy and so on and so forth, I've been waiting my whole life to share with you. But I am your grandma and I would love to have a conversation and talk to you. And so it's like God just literally opened each door, as he knew I could kind of, handle them and take them. And so after that experience, now I got to meet like my biological grandma. I remember going and meeting her and going down into the basement of her house and seeing all of these baby pictures of myself. Talk about like freaky, right? And she kind of shared with me her story, and it just was like it was a moment of healing because like I saw myself in her, like we had a lot of like physical feature resemblance, even our
Yeah.
mannerisms and kind of our sense of humor. And so it was like it was just like as I kept like moving forward and not giving up and keep trudging even as hard as it was. And my biggest battle, and I think the battle of most people that have endured any type of abuse the way that we did, is like really just focusing on our power of rewiring, right? Like rewiring those thoughts, rewiring those feelings, those emotions. And so I know and I can say confidently that I believe that everything we went to was for definitely a greater purpose. And I hope that, as we kind of conclude this podcast episode, that I believe you wholeheartedly the same way. There's no malice here. There's no I want to bash these people or tell how terrible and horrible they are. Outside of that, I believe in the end, they'll have to face what is given to them for their actions, and every action has a consequence. And for me, that's not for me to judge, but it is for me to step up and say, hey, and I feel like God called me with my personality to be that person. Because for my batch, I was that first person that broke free. And when I broke free, it kind of opened a gate where now I saw tons of other people leaving. And so for me, if I had to do it all over again, knowing that like what I've gained today and where I'm at today, I would do it. I would do it. And I just want to personally say thank you for taking that first step forward of courage and sharing your story. I mean, I watched people ridicule you. I watched people not believe you. I watched it, but you know what? It didn't stop me from wanting to share my story. And part of me wanting to share my story was to lock arms with you of like, listen, here's one perspective, here's another one, and whether people believed me or not, that wasn't my intention of trying to get people to believe me. It was the intention of like, listen, you know what? we went through this, and honestly, listening to your story did trigger things for me, and I'm sure us talking today triggered things for you. But I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, you kind of were that domino effect. Like you took that leap of faith to take it to social media, and I hope that you know that within, like, it's your story, and I thank you for sharing that, because it's powerful.
Well, thank you, Katie. And like usually like towards like the end of the episode, I always ask everybody what is your truth that heals. But I think you've already answered that by sharing, your truth throughout this episode. And I wanted to go back and kind of like maybe just chill this part of the conversation out a little bit because we're coming towards the end. I know it's very serious, but let's have like a bit more of like a little chit chat way to kind of end this. Um, do you have any good memories?
Yeah, I do, honestly. Like, and that's the thing, I always try, like, for every bad there's good, right? And I remember, like, so I have a couple funny stories that I'd like to tell. So
Cool.
I I one of the things that we were talking about, that we often found humor in is, so in the Philippines they had, like, I don't know what they were. They weren't like typical dogs like you and I have as pets. They're kind of like wild dogs, right? And like
Mhm.
I remember one time this dog drug in this like fish, right? I don't know where he got this fish, but it's like this big nasty fish. And the superior is like, "Hey, Katie, go out there." And then in the Philippines, they had like their broom was like a bunch of, like, I don't know, like wicker sticks tied
Yeah.
together, and then like it had like a flat dustpan. So I literally like scooped this big fish up, and I like was gonna fling it over the like concrete wall barrier. So I was like, "Yeah, great, I did it." And like they're like, "Hey, thank you for getting rid of that." It's like one of those moments. Well, the next day there was like this god awful smell. Like
Um,
none of us could figure out like what was going on. It smelled like literally like dead, something dead. Well, what happened was when I thought I threw this fish over the compound, somehow it didn't go out of the compound. It landed on like the tin roof above where like the chapel area was. And it was literally just like baking in the sun. Okay. So I was always like, one thing I do remember about the Philippines too is like, I just remember the simplicity of the people. Like when we did get to go out in public, like, I remember this one time it was like a really heavy rain, like super, super heavy rain. And like it was weird. Like you look at one side of the street, there was like houses, and on the other side of the street, like people like had their houses built out of like plywood, like nothing substantial. And I remember we're like trenching through this water, and all I'm thinking is like, dear God, protect me from snakes, because I absolutely hate them. But at the same time, it was like a devastation that took place. There's like all this flooding, and people are like losing their houses, and like stuff is floating down. And I remember one time specifically seeing like a helicopter that was like flying over the area, and all these Filipinos like jumped on top of their like washed out houses that I've left, and they're like waving and smiling and like giving thumbs up. And I'm like, holy smokes, like these people have massive devastation, and they're trying to like find joy in that. And I think that yes, we shared a lot of like painful situations together, but like we shared a lot of things we can look back and laugh on. And another like infamous story of mine was I was always just kind of doing things to like for the betterment of everyone, but like always kind of like not necessarily out of obedience. So I remember one time we were in this like compound, and the bishop, it was one of the bishops, invited us for dinner, and we were supposed to be on our best behaviors, like, like you're supposed to be on your best behavior. Well, I can't think of, it wasn't rambutan. What's the other little like fruits? Um,
Lanzones?
Maybe, yes, yes, those. They're like the little ones. So, anyways, there was these trees on this property, and I decided, for whatever reason, I don't know why I decided this, I was gonna go hit the mother lode and like shake this tree and get all this fruit for all of the brothers and sisters, right? And so I was kind of showing off my climbing skills, because like I literally like had nothing. I took off my shoes and I climbed up this tree, and I start shaking these like fruits, and they're coming down, and all of the brothers and sisters are like gathering them. And then all of a sudden, Ryan, I kid you not, it feels like my body is like on fire, and it was fire ants
Oh my gosh.
everywhere, like all over my body. So like the biggest, it was an accidental thing, but I was like trying to get like, I had like a long sleeve blouse on and I was like trying to like get it off because it was like covered in these fire ants, yet like the brothers were around and I'm like, ah. And so anyways, that was a very painful, like funny moment looking back now of like things that that we kind of did. And then to top it off, the lightest thing, I accidentally got the nuns drunk.
How'd you do that?
Okay.
Was that
So,
accidentally or was it purpose?
well, no, it it was accident. So it was, I was actually experiencing my 21st birthday. And we were in Dover, and one of the beneficiaries, I okay, so she's Italian and they often cook with like liquor in their, sometimes like, in their thing. So I secretly maneuvered to ask her because I said it was for like this project we were doing for some liquor, and we were gonna make hollow hollow. So I was like, only one other sister knew I was doing this, and it was Sister O. Well, long story short, I didn't realize this, so I pour this like alcohol in what was going to be like the gulaman or whatever you call it, like little jello pieces.
Yeah.
Well, us, when we cook jello in America, like we heat it up and then it like cools. So I was like, oh, it'll probably cook off, but let's just try this. So I poured like a majority of this, like it wasn't like hard liquor, it was like liqueur, but I poured like a ton of it in this gulaman and it didn't cook. It just instantly hardened. And I was like, oh crap. Like, it was like this pan of it and you're like cutting it up. So I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? So I hid the bottle, and then I was like, we just need to like make something different and not know. Well, they started coming up and they were cutting it all up and they started putting it in their hollow hollow. And like I didn't know what to say. And I was like, I'm dead meat if they like bust me. And so like three of the sisters thought something was seriously wrong with them because slowly it like started hitting them. Their cheeks got rosy. Like I knew it because I could taste it. And anyways, we laughed for that for a long time, but I had to come clean and explain that I put this, like, it was a liqueur, so I can't imagine it was being that strong, but for people that didn't drink alcohol. So I can successfully say that I did get nuns drunk in my time in the
All right. That's
the
so funny.
convent. But now I try to look back and remember those good memories. One thing lightly, just to kind of end it, is when I shared my story, a few people reached out to me directly and they're like, wow, you sharing this, I forgot about this remembered. But it created a sense of closure for us because we got to share and just thank each other for being there for each other in some tough times. But it also gave us some times to now, what wasn't funny then, like look back at some of the disciplinary measures and look back at some of the things that we went through and laugh at it lightheartedly. It like one sister remembered, I was pretty vain, I'll be honest. Like they always wanted us to cut our hair like so short and like
Yeah.
nothing. Like, and I remember one of the sisters, Sister O, um, she got the scissors and she trimmed my hair and she gave me like a bob, like it kind of like went down this way. And then she would secretly, she kind of had longer nails, she would pluck my eyebrows for me like with her fingers and we would kind of help her. And I'll never forget, the superior was like, who cut your hair? And my eyebrows were like perfect. And the next thing they did as a DM is they cut my hair like so short. It was like a mushroom cut, and
Oh,
I had to wear that for like a year. But I mean, we just look back and we kind of laugh at some of those memories now. And I think you have to. And I just hope that like, what was so painful and traumatic back then, like I hope people can get to the point of their lives where they can look back and be like, yeah, we did it, and laugh and smile about it. So I don't want to say that I resent those 5 years and they were all terrible and miserable. Like I met some good people there. Obviously I had some tough life experiences, but there's things we can look back at and find the joy and laugh in, and have some light laughs, so to speak.
I wanted to thank you, Katie, for being here on the Truth Heals podcast. For all of those who have listened, thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe to this channel, like, and share so that other people may also discover the truth that Katie has shared today. And I wish everybody a great day. And again, Katie, thank you so much for being a guest here on the podcast.
Yeah, Ryan, thank you. Appreciate it.